Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today is July the 5th, 2026, and we are here to talk about the world, current events, foreign policy, economics, you name it, we'll talk about it. Another episode of World Discussion with Agent Smith. Smith.
Hello.
Sir.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well. About yourself?
Can't complain. Can't complain. Pretty lazy week overall.
That's good. Good to not be overly busy. I have a...
That's such a charitable read of that.
No, not only that, but we have a special update. You asked about bitter sugar a couple weeks ago, and just 3 days ago, he messaged me just giving a general update of what he's been going through. And he's okay. He's healthy. He's physically okay, but his apartment got hit by a missile. So for people who don't know the backstory, Bitter Sugar is someone who came on the show with us 2 days into the war in Ukraine. He lives in Kyiv, so he could just give us a first-hand account of what their experience was like. And we've been updated by him over time, but it's very hard. And yeah, we have an image of his building here. Show you on stream. He drew an arrow here. This was the unit that he was in. Fortunately, he was not there at the time, so he's fine, but obviously his house is not fine. And this, I guess, is a fairly common occurrence for people because they're getting shelled and so on. But there was a, I wouldn't say funny or good story, but a good example of when a bad thing avoids a worse thing. His car was fucked up, so he had to go take it to the shop to get it fixed. And when it was in the shop, his home was shelled and destroyed, which means the car was totally fine. So the car, because it was fucked up, ended up not being at home, so it didn't get fucked up. So that's a plus. But yeah, really hard experience for him so far. But he's very resilient, obviously, dealing with this. And we have some Ukrainian people in the chat right now, I believe, as well. But very happy that he's physically in good shape. He said morally he's tired, annoyed, and devastated. He just wants some peaceful evenings, some good quality sleep. He wants to grow roots somewhere and call a place home and not lose it in a couple years. Wondering how long this shit show is going to last. It's already lasted more than 4 years. He talked to us 4 days into the war in 2022. He would have been shocked to know that it'll last more days than World War I and counting.
Well, there was a lot of talk at the time that if it didn't end quickly, then it would be a dragged-out affair. And yeah, that's pretty much what it came to be, unfortunately. So I'm sorry to hear about his home. That sucks. But I'm glad he's okay, at least.
Same.
Yeah, I'm sure it must be absolutely exhausting. I think he mentioned before about how, it just happens so often that you have missiles and whatnot barraging, cities and whatnot, that you almost get used to it to the point where you, in a lot of cases, don't even take shelter anymore because it's just incessant. So fortunately, that's not what happened here. Definitely a close call, it seems.
Yeah, it's something that it's hard to relate to if you haven't been in wartime, but what's happening psychologically is the person has their fight or flight sense activated all the time. And that costs your body and your mind more energy because you're basically straining the system to be alert to not die because you're under threat of dying. Most of the time in the modern world, people go about their day-to-day with almost no threat of dying. The most dangerous thing we do regularly is probably drive on the road. Aside from that, you're almost never at immediate danger, and even on the road, it's mostly safe with a chance of accidents, whereas with wartime, it's mostly unsafe with a chance of safety. So it's pretty hard to imagine what that would be like, but yeah, being way behind on sleep, being constantly worried, unable to focus on like your own creative process or what you want to do because you're dealing with all that threat. But yeah, big ups to hanging in there. In a sense, the fact that it's dragged out also means that it's not a win for Russia yet, which the predictions of the war were Russia should stomp because they're a superpower, so they just take over the country really quick and install people. But the Ukrainian response was quite strong. The rallying effect around Zelensky, who really stepped up, regardless of like whatever mistakes he's made and things along the way, his I guess morale boost to the people was really important for kind of solidifying a strong resistance rather than trying to take a conciliatory approach and maybe make compromises for territory right away. The fact that they've resisted as hard as they have, I think, as painful as war is, it's definitely building the noble and like brave story of the Ukrainian people. For their name to be established as an underdog who wouldn't give up and is consistently defending themselves when the rest of the world is trying to pull its punches so we don't escalate to nukes. So they're basically suffering more than anyone else right now in terms of casualties over time, I would guess. And then Russia is throwing young men at this as well, and they're losing a huge share of a generation. So it's a very heavy cost for Russia as well, and that decision is going to be on the history of these nations. So it's really big of Bitter Sugar to share his story with us. It's got to be really isolating to be fighting this, and then we aren't really like going in to just stop the violence and protect them. There's just so much fear of escalation that the world is trying to give what aid they can without overstepping and making stuff even more crazy. But yeah, damn. Thank you, Bitter Sugar, for the update. He said he may be willing to chat with us, just do another kind of conversation. Doesn't need to be the whole episode, but however long we feel like getting his take on things. It's really cool to get firsthand perspectives. Agent Smith and myself are both from the United States, so our perspectives are skewed in that direction. We read English-speaking news, and we were taught American history in school, that kind of thing. So for people to be in a place in the world where you see stuff firsthand, that's extremely valuable for us having a really unfiltered human take of what's going on.
Yeah, I'm certainly down for that.
Sweet.
I think I've still got notes and questions from last time, so and I'm flexible.
Nice.
Yeah, unfortunately, history and fate charge a very high price for independence, and effectively that's what Ukraine is fighting for, among other things. And yeah, it's the price is steep. You don't get away from a regional hegemon that easily.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that the people don't give up on that. I think it would be easy to get exhausted and cynical and try to take any kind of way out. But I'm hopeful that as high as the price is, they're able to do something with it and improve things in Ukraine, politically, economically, etc. Maybe that's an overly optimistic take, but yeah, hopefully things will get better in the medium to long run as a result of this. I would hate to think they're going to all this trouble and then are not able to leverage it into the kind of improvements that reformists in Ukraine have really been seeking over the past 10 to 20 years.
I would like to make a hopeful, optimistic prediction that after this is all over, there will be a wave of big investment into Ukraine to rebuild stuff, and they're going to have some of the freshest, most cutting-edge technological infrastructure in the world. I feel like that is somewhat of a post-war trend in countries that have sustained major damage due to a big war, and then they get investment, and then they end up being a front runner. And Ukraine, they are a world peer with all of us video game nerds from the StarCraft scene. We have a lot of known and loved Ukrainian players. I follow StarCraft and Dota, so lots of representation from Ukraine there. So yeah, let's see that happen. Let's wrap it up. Okay, wrap up the war. That's enough. We've had a lot of it. We'll call it here. Let's make some really sweet ass buildings all over Ukraine. Fix stuff up. Maybe make some stuff throwback and retro as well, if you want to keep some of that classic vibe. That would be nice. But thank you, Bitter Sugar, very much for keeping up with us and letting us know how things are and just what your personal experience is like. And we'll see what happens. Slava Ukraine.
Indeed.
So it's hard to follow that up. We kind of hit the heaviest item out the gate, but keeping the ball rolling on a lighter note, soccer is a sport that people cheer about. And I have the very big news, and this is just very enjoyable to me as someone who's been cheering for Norway. They fought Brazil today in the World Cup, and Brazil was the heavily favored team. Any influencers you see, soccer analysts, they're all saying Brazil's going to win, Brazil's going to win. Brazil's a Titan team, Brazil's going to win. Norway wins. Boom. Got him. 2-1. Love to see it.
Quite the upset.
Yep.
Well, you must be excited for the motherland.
Yeah. I don't know if they gender the land with how they talk about it. I know the fatherland is how they refer to Deutschland, Germany.
Mm.
And then Russia is the motherland.
Radina.
What is Norway? Does anyone in chat know? And are there any other countries that have a descriptor like that? Well, for a random country that I'm kind of curious about historically, and I think these countries are going to face each other, so it might be fun to compare them. Spain and Portugal used to be really prominent European empires that had influence all around the globe at a certain point. And Spain, more so than Portugal, was an economical and military powerhouse as well. Just huge amounts of money, really expansive kingdom that extended around the world. And they could wage their own wars, they could police their own religious beliefs and so on. They just had a ton of economy and capital. And then it crashed and then never really bounced back. I don't think either Spain or Portugal are anywhere close to their relative economic standing on the global stage than they were. But they're still really good at sports, so they do some stuff pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty accurate reading. I don't think there was any single one economic crash that could be said to mark the decline, per se. It was more just a long period of economic mismanagement. And that was really the root of it. And it was never really fixed. And that created a kind of institutional financial rot at the heart of the Spanish Empire, anyway. The Portuguese Empire was never really that powerful to begin with, so that's kind of a different conversation. But in the case of the Spanish Empire, yeah, a long period of economic mismanagement, basically way too much spending. There was an attempt to kind of offset the effects of that, because when you spend too much money, right, because the government was getting all the revenue from gold extraction in the Americas. When you spend too much money, it's not just a problem of debt. It also has knock-on economic effects. Basically, it creates significant amounts of inflation. And it also creates a kind of, almost kind of like Dutch disease. Basically, it crowds out industry, right? Because it's easier to just import stuff when you're just spending shit tons of money, and especially when you have easy access to money in the form of specie, like just gold, like raw fucking gold bars getting imported into the country. That basically was just free money for the people who had access to it, and they just spent it readily. And because of the inflationary effects, stuff in Spain became expensive to the point where it was cheaper to import goods. And that created a disincentive to build and create stuff in Spain. And that resulted in the decline of what, I don't want to say manufacturing per se, because people will get the wrong idea, but uh, the contemporary equivalent of manufacturing declined in Spain because of this phenomena. And that kind of eroded the productive parts of its economy over time and exacerbated the problems with the inflation and the trade deficits that emerged on account of all of the spending. And the government, again, never really fixed that. There were some really smart bureaucrats who tried to implement reforms. There was one in particular who was a noted reformer. I don't remember his name. But none of them were able to succeed. Like, it just never worked. And the result then was recurring debt crises. The government would spend, spend, spend. The underlying economy eroded. Eventually, even all of the gold they had access to wasn't enough for all of the stuff they were doing. So they started borrowing against the gold. And eventually they borrowed so much that even financial markets were like, yeah, even the Spanish Empire is not going to be able to pay all this shit off. So we're not going to lend you money anymore. And so then the result was a default. And this happened multiple times, I think mostly in the 1600s, but also in the 1700s. There was a whole litany of debt defaults in Spain, which is impressive, again, given all of the gold they had access to. Like, they were really, really profligate. Part of it was because of the wars. You know, there were a whole bunch of wars of religion in the 1500s and 1600s. And those were, of course, very expensive and drained their coffers significantly. But a lot of that was just wars of choice. Like, they didn't have to do that. They didn't have to fight against Protestant reformations and revolts and to try to preserve Catholic hegemony in Europe. Like, that was kind of a prestige thing for the Habsburg family. It wasn't really that big of a strategic threat for them. You could argue that the wars against the Ottomans were more necessary, but even then, they probably would have been just as well without. So yeah, just financial irresponsibility, ambition, the desire to build on and expand Spanish, well, not Spanish so much as Habsburg hegemony, all of that really undermined them in the long run. And it's eventually what wrecked them.
I'm starting to see the gold flow of Spain's success and then collapse, in that it's not that Spain, the land, the country area, was spawning all this gold. They had the tech to access a bunch of gold and then take it from all kinds of other different places, which gave them just a bunch of liquid currency, but they didn't do a good job of making that into production and tech. They just like spent that on dumb shit as fast as they could. Basically the equivalent of Lamborghini's vanity projects and like, yeah, dumb shit basically. When what if they did a sovereign wealth fund like Norway with all that gold? Wouldn't Spain be like turbo rich?
That would have been the smarter thing to do at the time. But, you know, Spain was kind of a new, I don't want to say it was a new country, but it was relatively new-ish when it came into all of that money. And so you can kind of think of the Spanish Empire in the 1500s as a kind of nouveau riche kingdom. And like a lot of nouveau riche, they tend to be profligate. Like, keep in mind, Spain was effectively conquered and colonized by Islamic invaders in, I want to say, the 700s. And afterwards, there was something like 800 years of internecine warfare between Christian crusaders who were trying to reconquer the Iberian Peninsula and the Islamic rulers of the Iberian Peninsula. And those wars only successfully conquered the last Islamic kingdom on in the Iberian Peninsula in the 1400s. So when Spain went out into the world, right, in the age of discovery, going out and discovering the Americas, whatnot, building their empire there, they had only really been a unified, stable kingdom for maybe a generation or two.
Wow, so they were brand new.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, pretty nearly so. And the Spanish kingdom, as we know it today, was actually the result of a marriage alliance between Castile and, what was it, Aragorn? I'm blanking out on the name. Basically, the northeastern part where Barcelona is. Those were two separate kingdoms. And then in the 1400s, they unified effectively via marriage alliance. And it was actually, I believe, the separate parts of that marriage alliance that paid for Columbus's expedition. Isabella and her husband, what was his name? I forget. So yeah, relatively new. And so when they hit it big, with the discovery of the Americas and all of the gold that they discovered there and extracted, they weren't really ready for that. They went from being sort of poor and war torn to being very, very wealthy in a very short period of time. So maybe it's not that surprising that they couldn't really handle the administrative load of handling the new empire and all of the wealth that it wrought.
That makes me wonder, does Portugal have a similar story where they were controlled by Islamic governance for a period and then didn't?
Yeah, they were also conquered by Islamic invaders in the same time period, and it also had to be sort of reconquered by the Crusaders. When we think of the Crusades, we often think of the Middle East, but there were actually multiple Crusades over the course of the Middle Ages in Europe, and some of the most prominent ones were actually in the Iberian Peninsula. Certainly the most successful ones were in the Iberian Peninsula. They actually did successfully eventually reconquer the Iberian Peninsula. They had much more mixed success in other theaters, especially in the Middle East. So yeah, Portugal has the same history, but they didn't really hit it big in the same way as the Spanish did with the Americas. Like certainly they were very successful in building an empire abroad, but it wasn't nearly as wealthy as the Spanish Empire in the Americas.
You could argue, though, that with the creation of Brazil and the success of Brazil, they were more successful than Spain long term.
Yeah, Brazil definitely has been a standout in that regard. Um, Certainly, well, part of that is just because Portugal itself never really got to be like that rich. Like Spain today has advanced economically considerably over the past half century. So even though its former imperial holdings in Latin America have done pretty well, Spain is actually kind of better off on a GDP per capita basis than most of Latin America. Portugal, by contrast, remains on a relatively even keel with Brazil. Like, if you want opportunities, if you want to get a good job, like, if you want to do something dynamic with your life, moving to Brazil is not a bad choice. I think Portugal in the past 10 years has maybe advanced a bit because I know there's been a big influx of people there on account of tourism and, content creators, that kind of thing.
Chat saying the name you were looking for earlier is King Ferdinand.
Ferdinand, thank you. Let's see, GDP per capita, Portugal. That's 35K per capita for Portugal, which is pretty good. I think that's gone up pretty significantly. So then Brazil, by contrast, it's almost certainly going to be lower than that. Yeah, it's much lower. It's like 12K. But I think Brazil's economy is growing faster.
And they have a higher population.
Yeah, they definitely have a much higher. Portugal is like 10 million, maybe. And then Brazil is almost 200 million. Yeah, so geographically, economically, overall, it's much larger. So, if you can get a job and live in Portugal, your standard of living will probably be pretty good, but it might be a little bit harder than in Brazil, since Brazil's economy is growing faster. Might be a
Hmm.
little easier to find a new job there. And it's not a bad place to live by any stretch. There are certainly regions that have not really developed that much or that are in the process of still catching up. But yeah, you can definitely find really nice places to live in Brazil. And if you can get a good job, you can live pretty well there because your money
Hmm.
will go further since things are in general cheaper.
Hmm. Cool. That makes
But
sense for the history of Spain. Because Spain is next to France and they're kind of similar shape, I think mentally I think of them as having a similar background and story. But was France never conquered by the Muslim caliphates and stuff?
no, they were not. In fact, one of the most famous battles in the history of Europe is specifically responsible for that. There was a battle called the Battle of Tours, which was in like the year 750 or something. I don't remember the exact year. But Islamic invaders, the same ones that had invaded and conquered Spain, the Iberian Peninsula, they actually did go on to try to invade France, but they were defeated at the Battle of Tours. And so Islamic invaders were never able to successfully conquer France correspondingly. They were pretty overextended by that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had come from like northwestern Africa, across the Channel, across the Mediterranean, across Spain, and then across the what is it, the Pyrenees Mountains
Hmm.
that separate Spain from France. So that's one hell of a supply chain. That's quite the expedition. And so, on account of that, among other factors, the French were able to check them and send them back into the Iberian Peninsula. And they never tried again after that. So, on account of that, France and the rest of Europe were safe from Islamic invasion from the West. After that, the caliphate that was created in Spain, which came to be called the Cordoba Caliphate, I believe, they became very wealthy and powerful, but they were also mostly focused on their own internal squabbles. There were a number of local nobility there, local Muslim nobility that would frequently rise up or engage in shenanigans. And so the ruler of the Cordoba Caliphate didn't generally have the resources or time to really think about expansion. And there was also a lot of drama in the broader Muslim world. Originally, I believe the original Islamic invaders of Spain were loyal to the first caliphate that was created. I think it was the Abbasid Caliphate, something like that. And that caliphate unified the entire Islamic world, such as it was at that early stage. But after that, there was internal political shenanigans, there was a leadership dispute. The caliphate collapsed basically into different caliphates. I think the subsequent caliphate was actually pretty successful in unifying most of what had been in the Abbasid Caliphate, but they were not able to get the Cordoba Caliphate. So that remained a separate entity perpetually after that. I don't think any of the subsequent caliphates were able to unify them into the broader empire again. So the Cordoba Caliphate was kind of an outlier, and it was pretty far away from the center of Islamic power anyway. That was way out on the frontier. So often, all of those shenanigans within the broader Muslim world kind of got more attention from the leadership in Cordoba than the potential for conquering some barbarian frontier in like France. Keep in mind, this was like early medieval, sort of late classical period of Europe's history. And in that time period, Europe was very much still seen broadly as just barbarians. It was not especially well built up economically or civilizationally. Rome had collapsed, so and it was being over Western Europe anyway was being overrun by barbarians. So it wasn't really seen as that worthwhile in the grander scheme of things. Like if you're going to conquer something, you'd prefer to conquer a territory that's well built up, has a lot of wealth, a lot of cities, etc. And after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, it was not that attractive a conquest. And keep in mind, insomuch as France was a desirable conquest, it was mostly southern France. That's where the most built up areas were. Those were the areas most integrated into Roman trading networks. The bulk of France, especially northern France, was still pretty unsettled, still largely frontier. If you conquered it, you were not going to make a whole lot of money off of it. So if you can conquer France, that's great, but it's not something you really want to go out of your way to do in like the early medieval period. And that's part of the reason why that is to say, the Muslim invaders did not try again after the Battle of Tours. They were kind of going strong, going on momentum early on at the time of the Battle of Tours. But after that, they lost momentum and they never really gained it back. There was never really a good cost benefit to try again.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a long-winded answer to your question. No, Islamic invaders never conquered France, and that's why.
Gotcha. Did any of the caliphates ever try to take Germany?
I don't think any of the caliphates did, because that was way north. That was way far away from anything that was readily available. If you want to get to Germany, you're either going to have to go through France, or go through Italy and the Alps, and and the Swiss mountains. Like that's especially a heavy lift. Or you have to go through the Balkans. And I don't think any of the caliphates ever conquered the Balkans. I think the Balkans were conquered only by the Ottomans. And the Ottoman Empire was kind of sort of a caliphate. They were not really considered a caliphate at first, but later on, when they kind of reached the peak of their power and had unified much of the Muslim world, they did then claim to be a caliphate. So if you want to consider the Ottoman Empire at the height of its power a caliphate, then yes, a caliphate did make a play for Germany eventually. But that really wasn't until the 1600s, when the Ottomans were kind of in decline. Yeah, the late 1600s, they had a big offensive to try to move into Central Europe. Because by that point, they'd conquered pretty much all of Southeastern Europe. And the only thing left then was to push into either Eastern Europe, which wasn't as valuable, or to push into Central Europe, where Germany was. And there was lots of cool shit in Central Europe by that point. By this point, Europe was no longer like a barbarian hinterland, frontier territory. They had built up lots of trading cities, lots of economic growth. The demographics had absolutely exploded. Like, it was well worth conquering by the 1600s, and the Ottomans very clearly saw that and made a play for it, but they were famously stopped at the Battle of Vienna, which saw a kind of Avengers-style team effort by European kingdoms in Central and Eastern Europe to try to deflect them, and they were successful in doing so.
What countries contributed to that?
Obviously, the Holy Roman Empire, whose territory was directly being invaded. Their allies, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, also contributed. Poles to this day are very excited about the Battle of Vienna. That was one of their high points.
Mm-hmm.
They're always hyped to talk about that. I think the Russians also contributed, if I'm not mistaken. So Russians, Germans, and Poles, I think, were the major contributors. So they created a kind of allied army, and with that, they were able to lift the siege of Vienna. Yeah, one factor also was Turkish infighting, which is kind of a running theme in Turkish history. I think the Sultan died during the siege, and when word got back to the generals in charge of the siege, they immediately picked up and went back to Constantinople. I don't remember if they took the whole army with them. I want to say they did not, but I could be mistaken. The timeline is a little muddy in my memory. But that was one of the factors that resulted in the Ottomans being defeated there. That was not the first time that had happened in Ottoman history. There was a couple of big invasions that ended up being stopped because the general in charge wanted to head back to the capital so that they could vie for the sultanship. Is that a word? So that they could vie for power after the death of a sultan.
Cool history stuff I didn't know.
Yeah, the caliphates weren't especially interested. I'm talking like the early ones, like from 700 AD to, let's say, like the 1200s, 1300s, whenever. Like in that period when the caliphates were still kind of at the height of their power, Europe was not really like their first choice of conquest. It wasn't necessarily that attractive. Keep in mind the alternatives, right? The Silk Road was immensely wealthy. And so if you could push into Central Asia, you would be able to tax like significant sources of revenue.
Mm-hmm.
So that's attractive, much more so than Europe, which was kind of at the tail end of the Silk Road and didn't really have a lot of natural resources of its own to offer. And also there's South Asia, right? South Asia historically has been like one of the wealthiest regions on the planet. And especially in the time period we're talking about. And so like if you're going to invade something and conquer something, South Asia is way more valuable than Europe. That's more what you want to focus on. And they actually did directly invade the subcontinent, and they conquered the Indus, if I remember correctly, mostly the northern Indus River Valley, but they were not able to push much further than that. Yeah, the South Asian empires at the time were too powerful, but that didn't stop the caliphates from trying. So Central Asia and South Asia would have been much more attractive, I think, than Europe. And I think that's part of the reason they didn't really push into Europe that much. And of course, as I mentioned, there was also just political instability. There was civil wars, uprisings, just constant churn and whatnot. You know, lots of people vying for power, creating civil conditions for civil wars. And keep in mind, you know, early on in the history of Islam, most of the stuff they conquered was still in the process of converting. And so that also created fertile ground for rebellions from people who did not want to convert. Like Egypt, for example, was originally mostly Christian, if not entirely Christian. And after Arabs invaded and conquered it and started converting the native population, I don't think a majority of Egypt converted until like 500 years later, if not longer. And I don't think they got like a clear majority, like 80, 90% until maybe the 1800s or 1900s. It's only really been in the past century that the Christian population has shrunk to around 10% of the population. That is sort of the tail end of a 1,000+ year effort to convert. It was definitely not something that happened all at once. It was not the case that the Arabs invaded and then everybody converted and it was like 90% Muslim. Definitely not. And the result of that actually is that Islamic rulers in Egypt have long been paranoid about the large Christian population in Egypt. And some of that paranoia has lasted into the modern period. It's kind of residual now because obviously Christians don't have the numbers to like rise up and seize control of the country anymore. But that actually was a realistic prospect for like 1,000 years. And as a result, there's sort of residual paranoia that has kind of lasted into the modern period and colors anti-Christian prejudice amongst some quarters of the population there. So if you're a ruler of a caliphate, then in addition to worrying about getting strangled with a silk cord or something, you're also worried about your recent conquests rising up and kicking you out again.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to take up a good chunk of your attention. Foreign conquests are great, but that's expensive. And you've got shit at home to worry about.
Makes sense. We've had a nice visit of history so far. Has it been a lively week at all with news? I haven't really heard anything other than 4th of July shit.
I mean, yes and no. There has actually been some stuff happening, but it's not necessarily dramatic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's like election outcomes, some Supreme Court rulings, etc. We could probably get through it pretty quickly here. Did you hear about the Supreme Court rulings?
No.
There was a couple of them, and I don't think I have all of them. I think they kind of had a whole gaggle of them all at once. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of birthright citizenship.
Mm-hmm.
That was a case that stemmed from the attempt by the Trump administration to curb birthright citizenship by executive order. So the Supreme Court has said, no, you can't do that. They also upheld a trans ban. I don't remember the specifics of the case, but I think there was like a state or local level ban on trans kids doing sports. It was one of those deals, I think. Mm-hmm. And so the court did uphold that. And then there was the big one for me was the FTC ruling. So they actually did rule in favor of the president on this one. So the president had argued that the executive has the right to fire members of the FTC and that restrictions on their ability to do so were unconstitutional. And so there had been rules in place since 1913 restricting the ability of a president to just remove members of the FTC at will. They were allowed to remove them, but they needed a reason. And so the president has argued here in this case that I don't need a reason. You're not allowed to force me to have a reason to fire them. The Supreme Court says he's correct. So that's probably going to have a dramatic impact on the composition of the FTC going forward. Presumably, he's going to fire a bunch of people now and just load the FTC up with loyalists. I don't think he's made any moves to that effect yet, but it would seem to be legal now. So presumably that's going to be in the cards within the next couple months. I'm sure that'll have some very colorful effects on the enforcement of antitrust and whatnot. We'll see how that could be very dramatic depending on how he wants to do it. So definitely keep your eye on that space. There was an addendum to the Supreme Court ruling here where they kind of went out of their way here to say that this ruling does not impact the Federal Reserve. So obviously this sets a precedent not only for the FTC, but potentially other agencies. That may have to be decided on a case-by-case basis, but presumably the administration will be more aggressive in trying to assert the executive's right to fire whom they want in these agencies that have traditionally been somewhat protected from that. But the Federal Reserve is not going to be one of them. The Supreme Court very specifically said that the president cannot just fire whomever he wants on the Federal Reserve's board. That apparently, to the Supreme Court's mind, is a special case. So those were the big Supreme Court rulings. Let's see. And then going abroad. We finally have a decision on Peru's presidential election. So they'd had it a while ago, but then it was very close. So they wanted to take their time, go back and recount all the votes and make sure that they had an accurate count. So that process is completed. A winner was announced, and the winner is Keiko Fujimori. That's going to be interesting. So for those of you who don't know or don't remember, Keiko Fujimori is the daughter of, I believe his name was Alberto Fujimori, whom was dictator of Peru in the 1990s. And a lot of people were very concerned about the prospects of a Fujimori returning to the presidency because a lot of people remember the authoritarian regime of her father and assume implicitly that she may have similar instincts and may try to set herself up as a similar dictator. So we'll see. We're going to find out. She had tried multiple times to become president. I think 4 elections now she had run, and she had failed in all of them. But she had a strong showing in the last one, and this time she's won. So she's finally broken through. Peru will have a right-wing, possibly authoritarian right-wing president for the near term going forward. Latin America definitely picking some interesting choices for presidents lately. I remember there was the far-right guy in Chile who won the presidency, Kant, I think his name was.
And I think I remember you telling me Fujimori is a very Japanese-sounding name.
It is. She is of Japanese descent.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was lots of Japanese migrant workers moved into Latin America in the mid-late 19th century.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a significant residual population of Japanese, well, people of Japanese descent in those regions. That was the same migration wave that resulted in the significant Japanese American minority in Hawaii. Same deal. Migrant workers working on plantations, moving and staying.
Yeah, I think I remember you telling me that a while back.
Yeah, after, well, in the Spanish Empire's case, they banned slavery relatively early on, although it was mostly native slavery. But I think even in the case of African slavery, they banned that earlier than like the English or the Portuguese or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
So Asian labor was a kind of substitute for African labor. And especially in the 19th century, when there was a big population boom in Japan, and they had a lot of people leaving the country to look for work, yeah, there was a major influx of people then. So I want to say like the northwestern coast of Latin America, South America, I should say. It's like the northern part of Peru's coast, some of Ecuador, and I think Brazil actually got a decent number too. I think most of Brazil's Asian Brazilian population anyway is disproportionately of Japanese descent.
I see.
Yeah, I don't think there's any other places that have significant populations of people of Japanese descent like that. And it didn't last that long. There was a big population boom in Japan that contributed to that, but Japan's economy ended up taking off in the late 19th century, such that there were enough job opportunities in Japan that people stopped leaving in quite such large numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So there was like a brief surge in emigration, and then it stopped. I think maybe the Philippines would be the only other example I could think of, besides Latin America and Hawaii. Because I remember specifically Mindanao and the environs around the largest city in Mindanao, Davao, had a pretty significant Japanese presence. Mind you, this is not because of the war. This wasn't because Japan invaded in World War II. Even before the war, there was a lot of Japanese investment in the southern part of the Philippines. And so there was a pretty sizable population of Japanese businessmen and workers there in and around Davao for a long time. Mostly, I want to say, in the 1920s and 30s. I guess there was a pretty significant Japanese diaspora in China, too, in that early 20th century period, but that had more to do with Japanese imperialism than anything.
Mm-hmm.
And they all ended up getting kicked out after World War II. So there's not like a residual Japanese-Chinese population left from that.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever heard of Port Arthur?
Port Arthur does not ring a bell.
Okay, that was there's a province called Liaoning in China, and it's got a giant fucking peninsula that juts into the Bohai Sea. If you look at a map of China, you can see in the northeast there's two big peninsula that jut into the Pacific Ocean. Mm-hmm. And the northern sort of prong of that has a city at the southern tip of it that used to be called Port Arthur. I think it's called Dalian now, something like that. And that was originally colonized by the Russians. The Russians extracted access to that port from the Chinese in the late 19th century. It was one of the so-called unequal treaties. This is back when China was getting the shit kicked out of it in the Opium Wars and wars with Russia and basically Western powers in general. And one of the treaties that they signed with the Russians as a result gave the Russians access to what they called Port Arthur. and it became a big Russian naval base. Later on, the Russians got their shit kicked in the Russo-Japanese War, and as part of the treaty that ended that conflict, they had to hand over Port Arthur to the Japanese. And so at that point, it became a major Japanese base. And so this was happening at the same time that the Japanese were significantly increasing their presence in Manchuria, basically supplanting the Russians as the major foreign influence there. And as the Manchurian economy took off, Port Arthur's economy took off correspondingly. And it got to a point where there were actually, I want to say something like 500,000 Japanese people living in Port Arthur, I think in the 1930s, which was, if not a majority of the population, a significant chunk of it, to the point where it almost became a de facto Japanese city.
Damn.
So obviously all of those Japanese people had to leave at the end of World War II. They got kicked out. But since we're talking about the Japanese diaspora, that was a significant example before World War II.
Today I learned.
Let's see. We can save Colombia. I did have a little bit of Ukraine news. So there was anyway, a Ukrainian oligarch, although his wealth was only like a couple $100 million. I'm used to oligarchs being billionaires, so I was a little surprised to hear that this guy was an oligarch, despite not being a billionaire. He's a really rich guy. He's from Ukraine. But he had renounced his Ukrainian citizenship and taken on Cypriot citizenship, I recall.
What is Cypriot?
And he get Cyprus, like the country of Cyprus.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So this guy got rich off of real estate. But the thing is, most of his real estate properties were in Crimea. And so obviously that's a problem because Russia seized Crimea. So what do you do? So this guy's answer to that seems to have been to shift away from his Ukrainian identity and roots and to de facto kind of embrace Russian occupation. So obviously he's a controversial figure. He was in the news recently because he was assassinated in Monaco, or at least there was an assassination attempt. I don't recall if it actually succeeded or not. But it was big news because Monaco is generally pretty peaceful. It's kind of uncouth to try to assassinate somebody in Monaco. The government there really doesn't appreciate it. And so, there was a big investigation, and there's a big manhunt now for the woman that they think is actually responsible. Yeah, apparently she set off a bomb in the walkway to this guy's apartment. And she apparently did get him. Like, she did hit the target. But I don't recall if he actually died or not. Yeah, the news is saying that he was wounded. Okay, so then he didn't die. But it's not clear yet who the assassin is or who they're working for. So that's kind of the question. Is this an SBU special operation to assassinate a high-value target whom is basically supporting the occupation of Crimea, or is this something being done on somebody's individual initiative? If it's the SBU, there's going to be some diplomatic tension, because again, you're not really supposed to do that on Allied territory. That's kind of a no-no. But the SBU has done that before, specifically with the bombing and destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline, which there's more and more evidence that they were responsible for.
When was the Nord Stream destroyed again?
I want to say it was in 2022, a couple months after the war started. Yeah, there was a lot of talk about it. Should we maintain the Nord Stream pipeline? Should we open it? Yada, yada, yada. The US government criticized Germany a lot for it. The Ukrainian government especially criticized Germany for it. And they ended up settling the matter once and for all by blowing it up. There you go, problem solved. And the German government wasn't happy about it, but they did not end up making a big deal about it either. They kind of kept it on the down low. I imagine that there were more complaints in private channels, but publicly, they were relatively mum about it. Let's see. The U.S. is ending its Islamic State mission in Nigeria. You may remember that Trump had the U.S. military bomb some Islamic State guys in Nigeria over Christmas, nominally because some presumably Christian lobbyists convinced him that there was a quote-unquote Christian genocide happening in Nigeria. There's not.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. So Trump kind of decided to give them what they wanted and took some military action, most of which was superficial. Like, violence is still happening there. And it's not the kind of violence you can bomb your way out of. But he decided to indulge in some performative violence for Christmas, a little gift to himself, I guess. And so there was, after that, the deployment of a couple hundred troops as part of a nominal mission to end the Christian genocide or whatever the fuck. Well, now that mission is over. The troops are being pulled out. The government says that they will continue providing the Nigerians with intelligence. But if I remember correctly, that was something they were already doing before the shenanigans. So this is basically just a return to the status quo. The performative violence has now ended. We have now returned to the pre-performative violence status quo. Let's see, some shenanigans in Turkey. The Turkish government is cracking down on dissent for whatever reason. There is a meeting coming up, a NATO meeting. So it could be that they're just cracking down ahead of that to try to mitigate the likelihood of big protests or whatnot, making the government look bad during a major international event. Well, that's my best guess. Otherwise, I don't really know why it's happening right now. So some of the people that have been affected, there's a whole bunch of NGOs that have had their social media accounts banned, or more accurately, suspended, I think. There's 200 people that have been detained, one of whom was a comedian, a guy named Deniz Göktaş. I cannot pronounce Turkish names, so I apologize. He was arrested for some comments he made during a show, which allegedly, quote, incited hatred and hostility, unquote.
Cool.
He also insulted the president, which is a big no-no in any authoritarian government. And then the Philippines has a fun reform effort that I thought might be worth talking about. So it's called the Dapat Isa Lang proposal, or at least something. Again, I can't speak Tagalog, so the pronunciation's probably off. I apologize again. But the proposal involves a referendum to pass some new reforms that would make it difficult, or at least more difficult, for family dynasties to maintain power within Filipino politics. And if you know anything about Filipino politics, you know that family dynasties are like a big deal. Probably the main political actors in the Philippines are family dynasties at various levels. Because it's not just the national level. It's not just like the Marcos family or the Duterte family, etc. There are local family dynasties that have dominated politics in their local areas for generations. And there's a whole gaggle of them all over the country. And so this is kind of a big problem for the Filipino democracy, because obviously you want your democracy to be competitive, for the barriers to entry to running for office to be relatively low. And that is not the case in the Philippines, because in the Philippines, family dynasties defend their turf. If you want to run for office in a territory where those offices are traditionally monopolized by a given powerful political family, they will fucking come after you. It is very common during election years in the Philippines to hear about violence, and it's almost always at a local level in rural areas.
Like they'll have them
Generally,
killed or just beat up?
they'll have them killed. They'll assassinate them for sure.
Jeez.
100%. There was a famous video, I think, a year or two ago that made the rounds in the Philippines and elsewhere, where what was it? I think it was like a car bomb or something going off, something to that effect. It was an assassination attempt caught on camera, like full stop.
Okay.
And that is despairingly common. So journalists in particular are frequently targets, but if you're actually running for office, they'll go after you too. It's actually very dangerous. And obviously there's, variance there. It's not every, locality that has it that bad, but it's bad enough in enough places that it's a recurring phenomena. And reformists have tried at different times to tackle it, but it's very hard to do when, all of the families in power are the ones who benefit from the status quo. Like, they have no particular desire to implement reforms to make it harder for them to retain control of their respective fiefdoms, so to speak. So this effort is going to try to deal with that. It involves a couple planks, a couple individual reform efforts. One of them is that only 2 members of a political family would be able to hold elected office at any given time, and they would only be able to hold offices at different levels. So one of them could hold a national position, but then the other one would only be able to hold a local position. So families could have 2 people in office at most, and they would have to be at different levels of government. They could not both be at the national level or the local level. And then another plank here would prohibit succession, substitution, and switching of positions among relatives up to the 4th degree of consanguinity, including first cousins. That's a new word for me. Consanguinity.
I've not seen that either.
Yeah, so basically the idea here is that it's not uncommon for families to kind of switch out family members in a given office. And, one guy loses an election, gets kicked out, so then they'll run somebody else or have somebody else move in. And so they want to make that harder. Basically, you can't just switch guys out. So in order to get this on ballot, the movement has to get 1 million signatures, 10% of the national voting pool. And so this is mobilizing civil society, so the Catholic Church is supporting it, schools, civic organizations, like this has gotten some momentum behind it. So it's possible it'll succeed. But again, it's an uphill battle when you have like the established elite at all levels resisting it. But this is going to be the most success, if they can get it on the ballot and actually pass the referendum. This will be a major success for reformists, probably the biggest in many, many years. And it's a credit to the Philippines civil society that they've been able to get it as far as they have. So more power to them. If they can get this done, it'll be a big victory for the health of democratic political culture in the Philippines. Yeah, there's some interesting trivia there about the landed elite in the Philippines, whom are basically the people we're talking about here. When the United States conquered the Philippines and incorporated it as a territory, there were a lot of people in the United States who were very skeptical about the whole imperial project. There was a lot of debate at the time. And one of the things that people were worried about is that American corporations might use their immense wealth to just buy all of the land in the Philippines and dispossess the local native population. And so reformists demanded that the US government pass rules that restricted the ability of foreigners and corporations and whatnot to buy land. So that made it very easy for the landed elite in the Philippines to preserve their control of their respective fiefdoms in the country. Land reforms are generally the main way that landed elites are dispossessed and disempowered historically. Revolutions and whatnot also play a role, but generally revolutions result in land reform. And so that opens the way for economic modernization of local politics, etc. Generally, local landed elites are major opponents of all of that for obvious reasons. It generally undermines their authority. But major land reform efforts never really happened in the Philippines, and partly it was because of this reform effort. It was meant to protect them from American corporations, but it had the unintended side effect of empowering local elites. And as a result, they have maintained their hold on power basically ever since.
Oops.
Yeah, if not for that, corporations probably would have ended up with a disproportionate chunk of the land. But the upshot is that they would have, in effect, disempowered a lot of the local nobility, and it would have been much harder for them to mobilize as a major political force. And likely later on, when the Philippines got independence, they probably would have just nationalized a lot of that a lot of those corporate holdings anyway. And so they would have ended up distributing the land to local peasants and whatnot, like with a lot of other land reform efforts in Southeast Asia at that time. So ironically, they might have been better off if American corporations had been allowed to have their way with the country after it had been conquered by the United States. Oh yeah, and a minor trade update here. This has to do with CUSMA. So after the Trump administration, in his first term, negotiated the reforms to NAFTA that resulted in the CUSMA agreement, one of the provisions is that it would come up for review in something like 6 years. And so now that's happening. And my impression is that the review would either result in an extension of the agreement or its cancellation, with maybe a 1 or 2 year delay before the agreement ended. Apparently, that's not the case. I was mistaken. So apparently, the review is such that they can extend the agreement, or if they don't want to extend the agreement, then they have an alternative setup where it will not be terminated immediately, but will instead be terminated early, and by early I mean in the 2030s. And there will also be required an annual review. Nominally, there is a provision also that allows any party to pull out of the agreement with 1 year notice. But that's not what choosing not to renew the agreement in the current year would result in. Failing the review in 2026 is going to result in the annual review process and de facto, well, not extension. The agreement will run its course until the 2030s. If it had been extended, if the review resulted in extension, the agreement would have been extended to the 2040s. So the choice was extend to the 2040s or allow the agreement to run its course until the 2030s with an annual review. And then at any point, anybody could withdraw with 1 year notice either way. So the news is that the Trump administration has announced that it does not want to renew the agreement. But it has not announced that it's going to withdraw from the agreement either, triggering the 1 year delay before the agreement is just canceled entirely. So the Trump administration made some headlines with the announcement that they're not going to renew, but then it turned out that not renewing is not that big a deal. It's basically just going to maintain the status quo. Okay, so that's about all I had for the short-term updates. Well, not short-term, minor updates, basically. So stuff is happening, but It's nothing too dramatic.
I believe we did have at least one question. Whenever you want to do questions.
Let's check that out. Let's see. What caused the Egyptians to convert? Did they just breed more? How can one imagine that? No, it was just natural conversion. It's not the case that there were Muslim colonizers who moved there and then eventually demographically grew to dominate Egypt. The native population converted. Like there were native Christian Copts living in Egypt who over time just converted to Islam. That's the main way Islam spread. There were Arabs who moved to the territories they conquered, but it was never enough to just fully colonize and supplant the native population. Generally, the Arabs that migrated in were relatively well educated and comprised the political bureaucratic elite, so to speak, and maybe some of the merchant elites as well. But beyond that, the bulk of the population remained native, so to speak. Yeah, there were a lot of benefits to converting, besides the fact that Islam had a lot of appeal to many people just inherently. There was also the fact that you were taxed less. You found it more easy to deal with traders. Traders generally prefer doing business with people of the same religion. So, you kind of got more business opportunities. The government treated you more favorably. The government kind of helped out mosques and whatnot and religious initiatives for co-religionists. So, you got more opportunities there. Yeah, just lots of inherent benefits to converting to Islam under an Islamic government. And so that alone over time resulted in more and more people converting until most of the population had converted. It's pretty much the same process that played out in the Anatolian Peninsula. The Turks invaded and conquered what had been a largely ethnic Greek territory. And over time, people converted until eventually everybody was Muslim. There might have been a little more migration of ethnic Turks from Central Asia contributing to that process, but by and large, I think most people in Turkey today are genetically descended from the pre-Turkish population. I would point out that that's a controversial statement. That'll start an argument amongst Turks. The Turkish government has insisted for decades now that most of the population is descended from ethnic Turks that migrated from Central Asia. And they've actually banned genetic testing in Turkey because they don't want people challenging that narrative.
We know who you're descended from. You're not allowed to double check. Oh, well, that's not suspicious at all.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah, it's probably bullshit. I suspect if there were significant testing done, they probably would find that, yeah, most of the population is descended from Greeks, maybe native Anatolian peoples, Armenians, Kurds, etc. The Turkish nationalists don't like that. So you're not allowed to ask that question. Well, that's all the questions we'd had. That's all the questions we had.
Nice.
Was there anything else you wanted to get to?
Trying to think if there was any countries that stood out to me. Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they've had a rough history for over the past couple decades. They were hit really hard in the Yugoslav wars back in the 1990s. Yeah, basically the center of the fighting. Like most of it happened right on their territory. So the casualties were pretty immense, unfortunately. Yeah. And I believe a good chunk of the population there, going even further back when it was colonized by the Ottoman Turks, a good chunk of the population in Bosnia converted to Islam. So they actually retain to this day a significant Muslim population. I think it's the only part of Yugoslavia that was like that, except for Kosovo and Macedonia.
Hmm.
I think those were the only other Muslim bits of Yugoslavia. So, yeah, during the Bosnian War, I guess, in the 1990s, the three major factions were the Serbs, obviously, the Croatians, and then the Bosnians, who were either the Bosnians or the Bosniaks, depending on how you wanted to, depending on who you were talking to, basically. And they were basically the Muslim population. And so they all ended up fighting each other at different moments in the war, but near the end, they ended up forming an alliance with the Croatians. And then they formed, as a result of the Dayton Accords, the Bosnian Croat Federation, something like that. Basically, it's the government that runs the non Serb part of Bosnia today. The Serb territories are controlled by a separate government called Republika Srpska. And together they sort of govern their respective territories as autonomous provinces within a larger Bosnian national government, which is actually controlled by an appointee of the European Union, I believe. It's kind of a weird sort of protectorate that the European Union has there. It's an unusual arrangement. In effect, the different autonomous provinces kind of just govern themselves, and the national government doesn't really have a whole lot of power over them, although it's been flexing its power more recently, which has been controversial. Yeah, I don't remember explicitly what territory within Bosnia today constituted the original Herzegovina. It's a little outside of my wheelhouse.
Mm-hmm.
But Bosnia and Herzegovina is technically the correct full name. But I'm struggling to remember the history of that naming. Yeah, nothing's coming to mind.
There was someone who was joking that the U.S. had to face two countries in the next round of the World Cup because the nation is called Bosnia and Herzegovina, but it's an and. So you're wondering, what are these two things and why are they fighting together?
Yeah, it's kind of a mouthful.
Mm.
And now's probably a good time to throw out the usual disclaimer. I'm not an expert in everything I talk about on here. I have more of a background in foreign policy and economics. So if I ever say anything wrong, stupid, or biased, please let me know. If I'm wrong, I want to know more than anybody. So participation by chat is encouraged in that regard. I don't read chat while we do this, but I will read it later. And we do like the feedback we get on here. It's always fun to learn from chat. Trying to think of more Bosnia things, but there's not a lot there. It's Bosnia just does not make the news very much. At least not since the 90s anyway. Periodically there'll be like a flare up in tension between the Serbs and the national government. That's kind of what the drama has been more recently. But then that ends up dying down and everything just kind of goes back to normal.
Mm.
I will say that the arrangement that the country is governed under right now is probably unsustainable. Because the government is not a true national government. It's just this weird artificial peacekeeper innovation that was designed to try to give everybody an excuse to stop fighting without really settling the overarching problem, right? Because the border between Republika Srpska and the Bosniak Croat Federation today, the two autonomous provinces, it's basically just where the front line was when the Dayton Accords were signed.
Huh.
So, like, there was never a full reconciliation between the parts of Bosnia that wanted to break away and join Serbia and the parts that wanted to be independent.
Mm-hmm.
There has not been like a full resolution to that. And so it is in effect a kind of frozen conflict. And that's one of the reasons people get so concerned when there's a flare up in tension there. Because if the national government falls or if Republika Srpska succeeds, it's not clear what happens after that. Like, could there be a resumption in fighting? Is there going to be intervention? Like, it's a big question mark.
Mm-hmm.
So, without resolving that underlying tension between the two communities, I think we're kind of destined for eventually some kind of crisis that will resolve it fully. Obviously, Serb nationalists would be delighted if Republika Srpska succeeded and formally joined Serbia. But that would be a major foreign policy faux pas within the context of European relations, because Europe has a long history of ethnic violence, especially in the 20th century, and they've tried to establish norms that you can't forcibly change a country's borders. They really try to discourage that. The 1930s are a case in point, but the Balkan Wars in the 1990s just kind of underline why that's still a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So even if Republika Srpska did succeed, it seems likely then that there would be some kind of intervention by other European powers to stop it, just to uphold the norm that they would be breaking by succeeding.
Chat's asking, what is Banja Luka in Bosnia? They have their own government
Banja
now
Luka.
within Bosnia.
Do they? That's the first I've heard of it then. Banja Luka. I'd have to look it up. I'm not familiar with it. Yeah. Thank you for letting me know, though. That'll be a fun read later. I like reading. I like reading and learning new things about places, so that'll be cool. Huh. Yeah, I'm looking at the Wikipedia article.
The chat's saying they have their own national bank.
I wonder why. What would be the purpose of that?
Probably banking, but yeah,
That
why
could
not?
be.
Why not use the other one? Yeah.
Its own government, like autonomous government within the national context? I guess I would ask for clarification there. Definitely got me curious. Oh, it's the capital of Republika Srpska? Is that it? And the central bank is there. Huh. Yeah, I guess I just kind of assumed Republika Srpska would be governed from Sarajevo, because obviously that's where the national government is, and I think that's where the Bosnian Croat Federation is governed from as well. But I guess not. Second largest city, most populous in Republika Srpska. Main economic, political, and admin center in Republika Srpska. Interesting. Yeah, I've heard of the subdivisions of Bosnia, but I've never read about the subdivisions within the constituent parts of Bosnia. Pretty neat. Let's see. Did you see Trump intervening in the World Cup?
No, what did he do?
What did he do? Let's see. There was an American player who was given a red card, and standard operating procedure for FIFA. Apparently, this is what I've read. I don't really know shit about it, but apparently, when you get a red card, that's like mandatory 1 year ban.
Mm-hmm.
And so some people on Team USA were complaining about it, and so Trump apparently called FIFA and quote unquote asked them to reconsider the ban, unquote.
Huh.
And the shitstorm came when FIFA announced that actually, yes, we are going to undo the suspension. So that's seen as blatant political interference and corruption.
Huh.
And people are unhappy about it. I'm surprised he bothered. I just assumed nobody really gave a shit about the World Cup. So the idea that the President of the United States would intervene like that for a sport as unpopular as soccer kind of surprised me.
That's
You really just,
not very much integrity for the sport. Jeez Louise.
well, I mean, it's kind of on brand for FIFA. FIFA is kind of known for being corrupt, so not that surprising. And Trump, of course, is known for being corrupt, so that's not surprising. Again, the only surprising thing for me is just that an American president would bother at all. Like, who gives a shit?
It's a
it's
power
soccer.
move, and if he gets people to do what he wants, then that's like the ultimate boost to his ego. So on a personal level,
guess.
that's got to feel like exactly what he was shooting for. From like a integrity of the competition, man. There's so much stuff in soccer that seems very sus. Like the way the penalties are awarded and called and stuff compared to say hockey, it's a very different world for what counts as being genuinely hurt. I was joking earlier in today's stream about how soccer players could benefit from a potential cross training in the off season with a gentleman named Matt Damon, who could help them really sell these injuries that they're getting on the field as they get them. Because like sometimes you see someone and they don't even get touched, but they look like they're yowling in pain, but it's like a little bit too obvious. I think a little bit of acting experience could really get you to nail that that selling point of I'm genuinely injured for the rest of my life here, to more likely get a red card or yellow card for your team or a penalty shot or whatever those things are. Could be a strong improvement. Yeah, wow. He just made a call and they changed the ruling.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. Presumably, as you say, presumably just out of ego, because again, I can't imagine anybody else thinking that would be worthwhile. I guess he never really just misses an opportunity to flex on people. Well, that's been the drama recently. I didn't ask you, how was your week?
It's been good. I went out and about on the town more because it's 4th of July weekend and whatnot. So we did some trivia night stuff on Friday night and then a parade on Saturday morning, which was pretty cool. Much more of a local event. There was also a fireworks show behind Mount Rushmore that the president went over and spoke at and stuff. We didn't go to it because it was like a lottery of who gets a ticket to the event. The tickets were free, but people from all over the country wanted to go, so we couldn't see it from our house. We could hear it. So that was, I guess, a brush with the national government in our neck of the woods.
Gotcha.
My brother actually worked on the team that made sure that there weren't any fire hazards from the fireworks, which is pretty cool. There was a light political kerfuffle in town. I was just hanging out and we're just at the store, meeting with people and talking with them and stuff. And apparently there was a tourist who was yelling at some locals and stuff. They were getting upset that everyone in the town was Republican. Which I found rather amusing because anyone with basic knowledge of the demographics of the region would also know that. And you would kind of know that going into that location. And you're not going to just change the demographics of a location just by walking into town. Or by yelling at the people, so the
Yeah.
person was asked to
Wow.
leave. But they were swearing loudly in the store, and they were saying that they were allowed to call people a bitch even though they were Christian. And that was kind of confusing.
Yeah.
I find it interesting when you have humans yelling in the wild, and when someone's angry, they oftentimes are not their most rational and logical self, and they'll make weird claims and they'll say kind of weird sentences just because they're emotionally compromised. And it seemed like one of those situations where someone's emotional and they're trying to vent, but they're venting in the wrong place at the wrong time at the wrong people. So not really much fruit born there, unless she just felt really relieved from venting.
Well, some people.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
So just a little bit of drama in town, but nothing crazy.
I can't imagine going to South Dakota and just being and bitching people out for being Republican. That's like being mad at water for being wet.
Yeah.
Like, what were you expecting? Do you not know where you are? I think you said she was a tourist. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Guess she didn't know. You got to research where you go when you travel, man.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how was your America Day?
That was pretty good. I had one of the best kinds of food you can get in the United States. I had Mexican food.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah. Burritos and tacos, just always a classic.
Hell yeah. Well, cool.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I did anything for the 4th of July. Not out of any desire to make a statement. That's just what I do every year for most holidays, just to shut in. I think I was playing Elite Dangerous or something.
I've been involved with the local running club, which is cool. I get to hear more perspectives. A lot of the people who participate in it are seasonal. They don't live in South Dakota year-round. They live in Arizona or Florida or somewhere much warmer, and they have a place where they summer here. So that's pretty common for people who are in this area, so they might not be year-round here.
Mm.
People joke that the first settlers discovered this place in the summer. They decided to build stuff, and then the winter hit, and they were like, oh, half of us died.
Yeah, steep learning curve.
Mm-hmm.
I did have a correction. Let's see. So this is from Sea of Whiskey. Thank you, Sea of Whiskey. Last time I said that every member of the Schengen Zone is an EU member, but not every EU member is a part of the Schengen Zone. That was wrong. My mistake. Apparently, there are non-EU members of the Schengen Zone. These include Iceland, Norway, Switzerland, and Liechtenstein.
Oh.
Yeah. So I was unaware. Thank you for the correction. Yeah, Switzerland and Liechtenstein technically kind of only count as one, though. So it's only really three. Because Liechtenstein has an arrangement with Switzerland where they kind of just adopt their foreign policy. Whatever Switzerland does, Liechtenstein is just kind of along for the ride. because it's really just too small to do otherwise. It's not realistic for them to try to have a independent foreign policy when they're basically the size of a parking lot, you know.
Yeah, and for people who don't know, parking lots in Texas can be really big, so Liechtenstein is actually still pretty big. Yes, we got an Aiden Smith laugh. Well, I had a question for our New Yorkers in chat about what it's like with the new mayor, because the new mayor is pretty different from previous politicians and how he's openly a democratic socialist. He's Muslim, so he's a very different kind of guy than a lot of the like traditional American elites. And he's had some big plans, big ideas. How is it living there? Is it any different? Is it any better? Is it any worse? I'm just curious.
Yeah, Mayor of Mamdani. He's very popular up there. I think the last thing I remember reading is that he balanced the budget, but he did it by basically delaying payment on debt. So it's not really balanced. It's just sort of redistributed. Oh, and I think there were some rent controls that he implemented. Rent control is a big deal up there. But yeah, I would be curious myself to hear from primary sources.
Yeah, Will Blur and Moss Neotech are both from New York. Got to meet them when I was up there.
Oh, nice.
We got stumped by a history question during the trivia night that kind of relates to New York in a way. The question was, what was the first capital of the U.S. as listed by the U.S. Constitution?
Was it not Philadelphia?
That's what we guessed, and we were wrong. I said that it was New York. The first capital of the U.S. was Philadelphia, but not per the Constitution. It was just the, I guess, temporary capital for a bit. I didn't really dig into this and look into this, but we apparently got that wrong. But if you look it up, it's kind of fuzzy.
Interesting.
Washington, D.C. is obviously the capital now.
Well, revolutionary states tend to be pretty chaotic after their revolution, so maybe not surprising. I think New York City was a pretty important city at the time, so it kind of makes sense that they would want it there. Although I don't think it was actually the largest city. I think I read a while ago that Philadelphia was actually larger at the time. I don't think New York City surpassed it until later.
Since
Do you
it's
know
4th of
anything
July,
about Liechtenstein? Sorry, what?
do I know anything about Liechtenstein?
Yeah.
No. I do know that they had a really good knight who specialized in jousting specifically, who took the name Ulrich von Liechtenstein, but he wasn't actually from there. I heard he looked a lot like Heath Ledger.
Yeah, I was surprised to encounter Liechtenstein when I was reading about the impact of Trump's trade drama from last year.
How
And
does it relate to them?
Liechtenstein, huh?
How does it relate to them?
They actually had a big trade surplus with the United States, and of course, the Trump administration doesn't like that. So they were one of the countries that was looking at a big hike in U.S. tariffs. Yeah, I was really surprised by that because I'd assumed Liechtenstein was just like a village or something, and that they didn't have a lot going on economically. But apparently, they do have a couple medical instrument manufacturers there. I don't know that they actually manufacture anything there, but I think they are headquartered there. And they've got some other services sector type stuff happening in terms of like corporate headquarters and whatnot. So as a result, on paper anyway, they actually sell a lot to the United States. And as a result, and because it's a tiny territory, they of course don't buy hardly anything. So it's inherently going to be a trade surplus. And for that reason, they ended up kind of on the Trump administration's shit list back when they were doing the whole performative trade war thing last year.
Tariffs.
Tariffs, yeah. But yeah, it's not just a village. They actually do have some economic activity going on there.
Cool.
Good on them. Very hard to see on a map.
Mm-hmm.
Basically impossible if you're looking at a whole map of Europe. It's jammed between Austria and Switzerland. And Austria and Switzerland do not have much of a border, so that really illustrates how tiny it is. Have you ever heard of Andorra?
Andorra.
Yeah.
That's the Star Wars show. Got it. It's not the Star Wars show.
Close. It's a country in Europe, and it's a micro country, I think is the technical term. It's like Liechtenstein in that it's very, very small. And hardly anybody ever talks about it specifically for that reason. It's in the Pyrenees Mountains between France and Spain, and it actually straddles the border between them. So it's got a French border and a Spanish border. And it has a special arrangement with both. It is actually a protectorate of both Spain and France. So basically, the French and Spanish governments have committed for like 1,000 years now or whatever to jointly protect Andorra. That was apparently the diplomatic solution to who should control it. And it's lasted all this time, right up to the present day.
Huh. Didn't know about that.
I think there's a couple other ones. Micronations, I mean, in Europe. Monaco is one of them, but that's really famous. I think everybody knows about Monaco.
Yep.
San Marino? Have you heard that one?
Yeah, sounds familiar.
Yeah, that's in Italy. And it doesn't share a border with any other country but Italy, so it's completely surrounded by Italian territory.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know why it was never annexed. I'm not really familiar with the history on that. But it is technically an independent state that is governed separately from the rest of Italy. But it does have close ties with Italy. I mean, it obviously has to. There's not a lot of choice.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of similar to the Vatican in that regard, which I guess is another microstate, actually. The Vatican does technically count as an independent country. They control their own territory, etc. Luxembourg is not really a micronation, is it? It's small, but it's not tiny small. It's not like Liechtenstein small.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know that I would throw them in. Malta is kind of more like Luxembourg. It's small, but it's not super tiny. Although there is technically an independent state within Malta. I think it's the Knights of the Cross, something like that. It was originally a knightly order during the Crusades. And the Maltese government actually gave them like a compound. And that compound is technically their own sovereign territory. It's not part of Malta. It is governed separately from the rest of Malta, and it's controlled by this knight group. I don't think it was the Knights Hospitalier, whatever it is. But it was a group of knights, and they actually retain control of it right to the present day. And it is technically an independent country. But I don't think anybody really recognizes it as such. It's pretty much just Malta. I guess if we want to count micronations that nobody else recognizes, there's a couple more, mostly the ones that have been created by Russia. So in Georgia, there's two, South Ossetia and Abkhazia. There actually used to be a third one. I think it was called Ajuria or something. And then, of course, for a long time, there was the Donetsk People's Republic and the Lugansk People's Republic in eastern Ukraine. I think they've since been formally annexed to those, so those don't technically exist anymore. And then there's the Transdniester Republic in Moldova, which does still exist. Although I guess that's not really a microstate. That's relatively girthier than like a Monaco or an Andorra. I think that's all of them. I think that's all of the ones in Europe. I guess you could be really esoteric and do something like the Island of Man or something, but that's a British territory. So it's not really an independent country. How did we get onto this?
Liechtenstein?
Liechtenstein, yeah. Talking about Liechtenstein for some reason. Oh, we did get another question. Given the UK is currently pushing for quote-unquote voluntary compliance from social media platforms to de-boost independent video and artificially promote government-funded public broadcast service videos on YouTube et al., are there historic precedents covering this in the UK? If the platforms push back, what are the likely outcomes of the votes by the various parties in the UK to make the Green Paper an actual law? Yeah, I knew they were. Now, they actually did ban social media for people under 16 in the UK recently. But this
really
is a little. Yeah, it could be. We're going to find out. I'm sure the kids will find a way around it, though. Yeah. That's almost invariably what they always do with bans like these. But this isn't quite that. This is voluntary, seeking to pressure social media companies into modifying their algorithm, basically, to de-boost independent videos and promote government-funded public broadcast services. I mean, they can promote them all they want. That doesn't mean people are going to watch them. Like, if they were popular, people would watch them as is without needing promotion like that. So, yeah, I don't think that's going to matter whether they comply or not. De-boosting independent videos in favor of them, though, that's going to be more, they're going to get more pushback to that. I don't think they're going to do that. They could try, but corporations are very good at weaseling out of things that governments ask them to do, or even demand that they do. So this will probably be a similar case. Yeah, in general, governments do not have a strong track record on regulating tech companies. Generally, tech companies find ways around whatever restrictions are put in place. And they also, while they're doing that, lobby the government heavily to rescind or water down those regulations. They've gotten to be pretty good at the game by this point. Governments have really not caught up yet. As far as who would vote how within the, oh, well, first, is there a precedent for this in the UK? Kind of. I mean, TV, well, TV is different though, because the BBC is its own TV channel. So that wasn't a case of them pressuring a private TV company to air BBC stuff. BBC was just a competitor in its own right. So yeah, if there is a precedent on this, I'm unaware of it. But to be fair, I don't think there's a lot of similar cases to this. Like with radio or TV, the BBC was just set up as a state-owned competitor. They weren't going to other private broadcasters and trying to force them to do stuff. I'm sure there would have been regulations, but I don't think they ever like forced them to advertise for the BBC or anything like that. At least not that I'm aware of. I could easily be wrong. As far as the outcomes on votes, Labor will almost certainly support it. The Conservatives might support it. You know, regulating tech companies has come to be something of a bipartisan issue in a lot of Europe. So it's entirely possible that the Conservatives will vote with Labor on this. But it could be that Conservatives sense weakness right now, so maybe they don't want to do that. You know, there's a transition of power happening because the previous prime minister, actually technically the current sitting prime minister, Starmer, was so unpopular that he decided to step down. So that's definitely a sign that the Conservatives could have momentum, or would if not for reform, but that's a whole other conversation. Regardless, they probably don't feel like working with Labor too much, and that could inhibit the possibility of cooperation. Presumably the Liberal Democrats will vote against, since that's kind of, since voting for something like this would run against their libertarian ethos. But there might be individuals in the party who might think otherwise. I haven't really seen their official position on this yet. God knows what reform wants to do. I'm sure they'll find some weird way to spin it somehow. I'll defer to the Brits in chat on that. I'm sure they would know better than me. It has very good odds of passing, I would assume. The British government has not really shied away from regulations like this in the recent past. So I suspect they'll move forward with this one. I would point out as a side note, it's easier to pass laws in the UK than it is in the United States. You know, the design of the system, the design of Britain's political system kind of unifies the executive with the legislature. Because if you're the prime minister, you're the prime minister because your party has the most seats in parliament. Mm-hmm. So you're much less likely to get divided government in the UK's political system than in the US system.
That makes sense.
And because you need a majority to have enough seats to secure the prime minister's office, a prime minister inherently is almost always going to have a majority in parliament that they can use to pass laws. So in turn, when a party wins in Britain, they generally win big. You're not going to get situations like in the US where one party controls the Congress and then another party controls the president, and then they block each other's efforts and nothing gets done. That doesn't really happen in the UK as much. It's relatively rare. Oh, did you get that link I sent you about the Brazilian country music?
Oh, yes, I did. I didn't check it out yet, but I did get
it. I posted that in the General Agent Smith Discord here by accident. I actually thought I was sending it to you. Oh. So my apologies for the mistake. Yeah, the name of the genre in question, which I did not remember last time, is Sertanejo Universitario. So that apparently has gotten quite popular in Brazil over the past decade plus.
Cool. How is Colombia doing? Because they're doing well in soccer.
They've got an election coming up, so there could well be a change in government. One of the things I was reading recently about the election is that the polling suggests that whomever wins is not going to have like a big majority in their Congress, in their legislature. So most likely, whoever becomes president is not going to be able to do a whole lot. They're not likely to have enough votes in the Congress to really do anything big. So the result from the election is not likely to be a big decisive shift in policymaking in Colombia's government. It's probably going to result in a prolonged period of inactivity and stagnation, politically speaking, at least. That's if the polling pans out. Polling sometimes is wrong and generally comes with an error in any case. So it's possible that whoever wins will pick up more seats in the legislature. But all of the polling suggests not, as of this moment, or at least last time I checked.
Hmm.
If I had to guess, I would say the conservative candidate will win. Conservatives have been doing pretty well in elections in Latin America recently. One thing I did see on YouTube, there are people talking about how Latin America is experiencing a major shift to the right, and that's not accurate. Like, if you look at most of the elections that have been won by the right recently, they've generally won by pretty narrow margins. In fact, Keiko Fujimori's victory in Peru's presidential election was extremely narrow. I think she only won by like 40,000 votes, something like that. It's like 50.8 whatever percent of the vote. It was extremely narrow. And that's generally been the experience in other countries. Yeah, the victories have been there for the conservatives, but they haven't really been decisive, per se.
Chat saying Chile was one-sided?
Oh, was Chile Emmanuel cast? I can believe that. I don't remember the exact margin. But whoever wins, Colombia will probably win by a relatively narrow margin. I think Ecuador's president won by a pretty narrow margin. And then Argentina was pretty one-sided. Brazil's election will probably be pretty narrow. They've got that coming up too. And more broadly speaking, this shift is coming on the heels of a major shift to the left that happened some years ago. And that shift to the left across the region happened after a shift to the right across the region, which had happened a couple years previous to that. So the past 15 some years in Latin America have seen the region lurch to the right and then to the left and now to the right again. And actually, there was a shift to the left that preceded all of that. That's kind of saw the rise of the Chavista governments. So, these big swings are not necessarily indicative of like major shifts in policy preferences amongst the general public. These shifts have been happening pretty consistently now in roughly 3 to 4 year blocks that have alternated now for 10 to 15 years. I would not read too much into them. It's probable that if the pattern keeps up, then 3 to 4 years from now, there will be a big shift back to the left. So some of it is just anti-incumbency. People don't like the guy in power, want to vote in somebody new. Some of it is just governments in power being corrupt and making mistakes and losing popularity. There are different factors that play into it. But I don't think it represents like a decisive shift in one or the other direction. Like, it's just, the region is just alternating back and forth at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, chat's saying that Cast's approval rating in Chile is 20%, so it'll probably swing left again after his turn.
That didn't take long.
And one of our friends from Brazil said, yes, the left side won in the election, but they're more center left, and the right and conservative are the majority in the government, so they'll still get in the way of almost everything.
Yeah, in Congress. Yeah, I don't think anybody's won a big decisive victory across the legislature legislative and executive in pretty much any country in Latin America since the Chavistas. There just doesn't seem to be enough consensus on a pathway forward. Yeah, the Chavistas definitely have a lot of support, and they did have unified governments where they got into power, but as we've seen, that didn't really end well for a lot of those places. Venezuela, especially.
Is it possible there's a centrist kind of angle to hit that focuses on the shared issues between the left and the right?
Yeah, there's always some bipartisan issues that get support, but those are not the sexy ones, right? Those aren't the ones that people like to argue about, so you don't hear about those as much.
Yeah.
Yeah, government in Latin America does function, especially in the past couple decades since the end of the Cold War. But it's fractious. More so in some countries than others, but in general, politics in the region tends to be very fractious and combative and corrupt. The corruption almost helps smooth things in a lot of cases, because if it were just ideological, that makes it harder, not easier, to get things passed. When people are corrupt, you just need to buy them. They'll kind of change their vote accordingly. But there are people who actually believe in things in government in Latin America. It is not, in fact, just a complete shit show in terms of corruption.
People with principles getting in the way of our corrupt government.
How are we doing on time?
Been going for 2 hours.
2 hours? Gotcha. I'm tired from my long week of grinding Elite Dangerous.
I feel that.
That fucking game makes you work at shit. I wonder sometimes if they don't do it on purpose just to drive more engagement. Yeah, what I found, Neuro, is that after I talked about it last week, I kind of went back into it, and I found, to my surprise, that I did not have the largest cargo ship in the game.
Oh, man.
I assumed I did. Huh?
Are you even gaming if you don't have the largest cargo ship?
Of course. Well, not if you want to be a space trucker, anyway.
Are you even a real space trucker?
There you go. Yeah, I thought I did, but apparently they introduced a new ship last year, and it has more cargo capacity, so part of this past week has been dedicated to procuring that vessel and tricking it out and modifying it, all of which is a big pain in the ass. You really got to do a lot of flying to a lot of different places to do all that. Could have saved myself some trouble and just bought it with actual cash, but it was like $40. They make you pay in Elite Dangerous. Yeah, it's probably got a pretty well-off user base, I guess. Are you familiar with the original Elite game?
I don't think so.
Yeah, it was an open-world space exploration, trading, whatever, space sim. It was an open-world space sim game, basically. But it was released all the way back in the 80s. It was actually one of the first. And it was very popular. But then the space sim genre kind of disappeared after a while, sort of in the aughts. It kind of faded out. The big gaming companies didn't really want to spend money on it anymore. They kind of saw the market as too small. And so the space sim community kind of starved for a long time. But then Kickstarter came along. And so I don't remember if it was the original team that worked on Elite, if it was like fans or whatever. But some guys got together, and if I remember correctly, they did a Kickstarter to try to raise money to create a reboot, a new Elite game. And that's what became Elite Dangerous. It was very successful. Pretty cool. It was neat that they were able to do that.
Yeah,
but correspondingly, a lot of the players are kind of older guys, I think. Probably tech guys, honestly, who remember the original game or maybe played the original at some point.
Chat, press 1 if you've played Elite Dangerous. Chat's asking if you have a trucker hat and a mullet.
I do not. I'm afraid not.
Well, it wouldn't be hard to find a trucker hat in Texas.
Very true.
I got one recently so I don't get sunburned on my face when I go for longer runs.
That's a thing.
Mm-hmm.
That is a real thing that can happen. I learned that the hard way. I learned it at a dramatic locale. I learned it at the Great Wall of China, of all fucking places. So good on you for being smart. That's a fucking hard climb, man.
Mm-hmm.
I thought going to the Great Wall of China would be like just walking along a wall. That's really what I thought it was. You really have to treat it like a hike, because that's really what it is. When you walk the Great Wall of China, you're going on a fucking hike. If you're not ready for it, you're going to regret it.
Well, it's got parts of the wall that are in various levels of repair and disrepair. So you have to kind of climb over some stuff, from what I've heard and seen.
Not really. Because you're right that the Great Wall of China is kind of broken up into pieces and that a lot of it is like not in good repair. But if you're going to go, you're almost invariably going to go to one of the well-repaired parts. Because those are the bits that have been basically built up as tourist attractions.
I see.
Like the one I went to north of Beijing is like really well known, and that's the one pretty much everybody goes to when they go to see the Great Wall. I don't even know if it's possible to go to the other parts of the Great Wall, because there's no infrastructure there to like support tourists walking all over it and whatnot. But in the restored part, like it's been repaired, restored. They've got like steps and ladders and shit. They got like what do they call it? A gazebo, whatever it is. They got means of transportation so that you can get around pretty easily, and they've got lots of like little restaurants and things. It's very built up. Most of the Great Wall is not going to be like that. What is it called? Bada Ling, something like that. They have like a specific name for it. I think that is actually it, Bada Ling. So it's in a decent state of repair. The issue is that it's not flat. Like they built it along the contour of the hills that they built it on. So they didn't flatten the hill at all. So whenever the hill has like a steep incline, then so does the wall. And there are parts of it that are like 30, 40 fucking degrees. Like it's steep.
Yeah, nowadays when we're making like huge projects like highways and so on, we just blast through the mountain. So it ends up being relatively more straight ahead. Not as many peaks and valleys.
Yeah, they had to make it nice and flat for you so you could drive on it. Not so much in China with the Great Wall. Not really a concern. Definitely caught me off guard. And that's my own fault, because I was actually warned ahead of time by my friend in China who was hosting me. She very explicitly told me, you need to kind of work out, get ready, do some walks, because it's going to be hard. I was like, yeah, well, maybe. Didn't really entirely believe her. And then after I went, I was like, I should have listened. Why am I so stubborn? That was stupid of me.
Hey, life lessons.
Yeah, I was exhausted after we left. Completely. I was done for the day after that. I was hunched over, heavy breathing. Yeah. Very clear I was not prepared. And then I got sunburn on my head because I didn't have a hat.
Crap.
Yeah, funnily enough, that was actually the first time I'd really left the house for an extended outdoorsy trip in years. And the last time I'd gone out, I actually still had hair up top. So I didn't even think about the idea that being bald would mean you could get sunburned just from being outside. It just never clicked with me. So I wasn't properly attired. So I got to learn the hard way. Go figure.
Yeah, that's kind of a life thing is when you learn based on whatever your complexion is, what your time period is for getting severely sunburned where you're hurting for a day or two. And that teaches you. It's like, okay, if I'm out in the sun for X amount of time, it's going to hurt me. Sun is very, 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 very bright.
Unfortunately so. Or perhaps fortunately. I guess we would all die if it weren't. So
Yeah, it
I
needs to
guess
be
it's
exactly
fortunate.
as bright as it is.
There you go. Well, unfortunately for the sunburn victims of the world, it can do some damage.
Okay, question for our Aussies in the chat. Why is your sun more dangerous there? 15 minutes and you're burned?
What does it have to do with like the ozone layer down there? I know it's supposed to be like weaker near the poles.
Ozone is thinner. Oh, yeah. Uh-oh.
Yeah, lots of UV radiation down there. You're supposed to wear lots and lots of sunblock. There's a big scandal in Australia not too long ago about one of the major brands of sunblock being revealed to not be that effective.
Oh, yeah, I heard they were putting some fake ingredient in it that wasn't actually
Yeah,
working.
something like that. And it was a big, big shitstorm. Like, people were real upset about it. A lot of people thought they were protected, and it turned out that for all these years they hadn't been.
And that's big because you can get skin cancer.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want that. Yeah, there's lots of public campaigns by the government in Australia about the importance of sunblock and staying out of the sun and whatnot. It's a real public health issue over there. So they pay lots of attention to it. I don't know if it's the same in like Argentina or Chile, because I know they have lots of territory that's at a similar latitude. So presumably they have similar issues.
Interesting. I was seeing a little clip that there are also some small islands in the Atlantic Ocean. One of them has a bunch of dairy cows on it and stuff. I think it was a Portuguese colony before. But I kind of forget that the Atlantic has a decent number of islands too, not just the Pacific.
Yeah, not a whole lot, but a decent number. I mean, excluding the Caribbean, which obviously has a whole shit ton. But yeah, I know what you mean. They've got their fair share. We actually talked about some of them last time when I was talking about the islands off the coast of Africa.
Yeah.
It's like Sao Tome and Principe, Cape Verde, the Canary Islands. I think there's also the Madeira Islands. That's another archipelago that is controlled by the Portuguese. And there's, no, wait, maybe I'm thinking of the Azores Island. I think Madeira might actually just be one island. Yeah, the Azores are definitely a big strategic asset. That was actually one of the reasons the US wanted Portugal to join NATO in the first place, back in the 1940s. The US wanted to use the Azores to project air power in the Atlantic. Figured they'd use it to help protect convoys. Because they actually did that in World War II. The Allies actually flew air cover for convoys out of the Azores Islands to try to help them fight the U-boats and whatnot. So the U.S. wanted to retain access to those facilities for the Cold War. You know, there's a Bermuda Island.
I know that's the capital of the Bahamas, right? Is that different?
No, No,
Oh,
different thing.
oh,
You know, it's a whole separate island. It's in the Atlantic, and it's not too far from the U.S. East Coast. I think, as far as I know, it's the only island near the U.S. East Coast that is not owned by the United States. I
is
don't
that
really
what
think there's
the
even.
Bermuda Triangle is named after?
Maybe. I don't think the Bermuda Triangle is that close to the island of Bermuda, actually. I
Oh,
think that's like further south. I'd have to look it up to be sure, though. But the island is actually owned by the UK. So hypothetically, if Britain wanted to invade America, they could use Bermuda as a jumping off point. Hypothetically. It's very small, though. Hardly anybody lives there. Let's see. Then there's St. Helena, which was famous for Napoleon. I think that's where Napoleon was sent, wasn't it? Let me fact check myself here before I go making shit up. Island of Twice, Elba, yeah. St. Helena, yeah, that's what it was. His second exile. And the British still control that to this day. And I think you were talking about that weird Norwegian island way in the South Atlantic.
mm-hmm.
And what was that called? Like Svelberg or something? Bouvet Island, okay. Or Bouvet, maybe. Oh, and then there's, of course, there's the Falkland Islands.
Yep.
Every Argentine's favorite. Yeah, those are actually pretty big islands, geographically speaking. Very small population, but unlike a lot of Atlantic islands, they've got some girth to them. I think Brazil actually has a couple islands in the Atlantic, kind of off the northeast coast of Brazil. But I don't remember their names. I very rarely have heard them discussed. I feel
I
like
know
I'm forgetting some.
India has some. There's one that has an uncontacted tribe, the Sentinel Island, I think.
Oh, yeah, Sentinel Island, and I think that's in the. Wait, fuck, where is that? Is it the Andaman Islands? Andaman and Nicobar Islands? No, Nicobar is like southwest India. Yeah, there's two island chains that India controls. One of them is the Nicobar Islands. Oh, is that? Okay, it is Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Okay, so that is one island chain. Oh, that's what I was thinking. Okay, so there's a different island chain called the Lakshadweep Island. And the Lakshadweep Islands. There we go. That's an island chain that's actually north of Maldives. So yeah, Sentinel Island, if I remember correctly, is in the Andaman Islands. And that's the one where that uncontacted tribe is.
Bless you.
Excuse me. It's a pretty strategic set of islands because they're kind of blocking access to the Java Strait. Wait, not the Java. Straits of Malacca. There we go. So if you want to get access to the Strait of Malacca from the Indian Ocean, you're almost invariably going to have to go through the Andaman Islands. So that's a nice choke point for the Indians. I don't think they have a whole lot of naval capacity out there, though, so I don't think they could really do it right now if they wanted to, but hypothetically, in the future, if they built up the naval infrastructure necessary, they could project force from there. I remember there was some controversy a couple years ago because the Indian government announced that they were going to start developing the Andaman Islands as a tourist attraction. I don't know if that extended to the Sentinel Islands, but even the other islanders were that have been contacted and have established contact with the Indian government. They were not really happy about it because generally that involves a lot of destruction of the environment, destruction of ecosystems the natives rely on, etc. So they are really not very thrilled about the announcement. I'm not sure what's happened since then. It's been a hot minute, but I imagine they're still trying to fight it.
It's interesting to think that we're getting further and further from the state of living that we were in just pre-technology. Our lives are more digital than they've been before. Our reliance on technology is more than it's been before.
Yeah, we're entering a new world, and more of the world is coming along for it. There was a long period in the 20th century when the modern world was pretty much just Europe and North America and Japan. And the rest of the world was just kind of trying desperately to catch up, but they were way behind. But now, with the boom in the global economy that's happened since globalization, with the 1980s and 90s and whatnot, since then, the global middle class all around the world has been growing dramatically. And so you're seeing a lot more modernity and sort of modern styles of economic development emerge in other places beyond the traditional developed parts of the world.
I would guess a lot of that is just the access to education and information. You mentioned the Crusades earlier and how Europe was seen as mostly just barbarians over in that area. And
Yeah.
Even though that's like a definitely a colorful period in history that we have lots of stories about, the general literacy rate was extremely low because the church controlled reading and writing. So if you weren't like a monk going through the Catholic Church or Protestant Church or whatever, you didn't really know how to read and write unless you had a specific job that required it, which most did not.
Yeah.
So that basically means you know your trade, but you don't really know other technology generally, and it's a lot harder to learn another trade if you can't just read a book on how to do it. Literacy is a huge, I would say, point of access for developing skills. You don't
Mhm.
have to know an expert. You could find information about something and then potentially do it yourself. So it's a big enabler of skills if you know how to read.
Definitely. Yeah, some of the most successful cultures over the past 1,000 years have been the ones that really emphasized literacy, and they benefited greatly from doing so.
Mm-hmm. I remember you mentioning that there's a general trend of whenever a society booms and you get a bunch of growth and then you conquer territory and you expand and you're this really kind of mighty force on the global stage, once that stabilizes, you're then reaping the benefits of that period of prosperity without really being incentivized to continue to innovate and continue to min max your society. So you're becoming corrupt, you're leaning into indulgences, decadence. It's more so about your immediate entertainment than making the best possible play on the board because the pressure is off. So,
Mhm.
yeah, pretty interesting to see that. Happened to I think the Ottomans was an example, the Roman Empire is an example. I don't really know about the decline of Egypt as much. Like, why did Egypt decline when it was so powerful for so long?
And kind of got bullied by the other empires for a long time there.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'd have to do more reading about ancient Egypt to really tell you that. Hasn't really been my wheelhouse.
Okay, a more modern quiz question for you.
Uh,
This was just one that I was kind of curious about. The Louisiana Purchase occurred under
uh,
Thomas Jefferson's presidency.
okay.
Why did France sell it to us at such a criminally low rate?
I think there was a couple of reasons. The most obvious one is that Napoleon wanted money for his wars. I think that's generally the answer you'll get if you like look it up.
Hmm.
But there was also the fact that they could not realistically defend it. Like Britain controlled the seas, and that made it very difficult for the French to realistically hope to reinforce their garrisons there. So the British were probably going to get it sooner or later if the war went on, as it was at the time. So if you can't defend it, then why keep it? You might as well get something for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there had been some ambition to reestablish the French Empire in the Americas, but when the Haitian Revolution happened, the army they sent to do that was defeated. And after that, they just decided to cancel plans in the Western Hemisphere. They let it go after that. So whatever plans they had were scuppered by the defeat of their army in the hemisphere. They really couldn't defend it from the British, whom they were at war with. And war is expensive. You got to get that money somewhere.
Mm.
So I think those were all the main reasons. I guess that's more why they sold it, not necessarily why they sold it cheap. Uh, I mean, supply and demand. The discovery of the Americas was that rare time in history where the supply of land was actually flexible because you were just discovering more and more of it, which increased the supply and lowered the price.
Mm.
And keep in mind, like, selling land in the Americas at that time didn't really mean that much. Like,
Because you're so far
technically,
of what from what you're talking about
yeah,
for a lot of it.
exactly. Like it's not built up. It's still largely populated by natives. A lot of it was unexplored. So technically, like you have nominal ownership of it, but you don't really have control over it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of means you have to sell it at least a little bit of a discount because nobody wants to buy land when you're not really getting like full title to it. I'm giving you not so much the title to the land, but rather the right to go there and see if you can get it.
That sounds like an
Good luck.
NFT to me.
Yeah, it's kind of scammy when you think about it like that. So, yeah, that's part of the reason for the discount.
Chat
You
saying
have
that New Orleans was France's only access to Louisiana territory, and then they lost the city, and they sold it at fire sale prices. How did they lose New Orleans?
I don't think that's true. I'll disagree with chat this one time, and I fully admit that they could be right and I could be wrong, but I don't think they lost New Orleans. As far as I know, when they were negotiating the Louisiana Purchase and when they handed over the territory, they still had control of New Orleans.
Hmm.
They now that said, France did lose control of New Orleans earlier during the 7 Years' War. Well, not during, but at the conclusion of the 7 Years' War, France was required to hand over pretty much all of their North American territories, except for two islands off the coast of Newfoundland, uh, St. Pierre and Miquelon, I think they were called. Um, but yeah, the entire Louisiana territory, including the port of New Orleans, was handed over to the Spanish. Most of it was handed to the Spanish. I think technically the land east of the Mississippi was given to the English, and then the territory west of the Mississippi, which included New Orleans, was given to the Spanish. So that was the treaty that ended the 7 Years' War. Later on, and I'm talking, when would it have been? Now, this would have been after the Revolutionary War. So during the, I want to say during the French Revolution. No, that can't be right. I'm getting the timelines mixed up in my head. Sometime in the late 1700s, the French government started bullying the Spanish government. They started demanding, I think this might have been Napoleon actually. I think Napoleon bullied the Spanish government after he conquered it, basically, and installed a puppet ruler, into handing over the Louisiana territories that the French had given them at the end of the 7 Years' War. So the French did not have to fight for it per se. They just forced the Spanish to give it back to them. So it had been Spanish for like however long it was, like 30 years, and then the Spanish gave it back to the French. And so then they reacquired New Orleans. And I think they kept it right up until the point they sold it and handed it over to the United States. So if that's what they mean by lost New Orleans, then yes. But I don't think they lost it like to the English during the Napoleonic Wars or the French Revolution, and then felt compelled to sell it for cheap.
I see.
I welcome correction, but that's my understanding.
And then Russia sold Alaska to the U.S., right?
1860s, after the Civil War. Yeah, what's his name was President Johnson, and people hated Johnson. They hated him. And so when he bought Alaska, when he wanted to buy Alaska, everybody gave him shit. Like Republicans in Congress didn't want to have anything to do with him. They very nearly scuppered the deal. Why do we want to buy a bunch of ice? What's the point of that? They called it Seward's folly. Seward was I think he was the Secretary of State at the time, and he was the lead diplomat negotiating the deal. And so his critics had no idea what the appeal was. Like, there's nothing up there, dude. Why do you want to spend money on this? And the riposte, basically the Johnson administration's rationale is that they're selling it for super cheap. Like, why not? It's just a whole shit ton of land that we're never going to get as cheap as this ever again. Why not? Just do it. So Johnson was probably right about that. It probably was a good deal, but man, did he have to fight for it. If Lincoln was still alive, it probably would have just flown right through Congress.
And then there was a Klondike gold rush, right, where they found gold there?
Yeah, that was the big gold. That was the big gold rush that resulted in a good chunk of Alaska's population growth after it became an American territory.
And then they had a second population boom in Alaska, right? Whenever they had the invention of Klondike bars, which are very delicious.
They actually did have another boom that had to do with World War II.
Oh, but not Klondike bars.
No, not the Klondike bars. Not so much. No, Alaska is sort of a forgotten front of World War II. There actually was a fair amount of fighting there, specifically along the Aleutian Island chain. The Japanese took Attu and Kiska pretty early on in 1942. And then after that, there was pretty consistent raiding by American airmen on the islands. And eventually, they actually did invade and take back the islands much later. And it was surprisingly expensive. It's very difficult to operate in that particular part of the world just because it's so cold. And they were not entirely prepared for that. And then after they took the islands, they set them up as bases from which to project power into northern Japan. People kind of forget how close the Aleutian Islands are to Japanese territories. So long-range bombers actually did raid Japan from the Aleutian Islands a couple of times. Yeah, there was a whole air war up there that history has kind of forgotten about because it did not end up being a critical part of the front. There was a time when it was expected to be, like early in the war. The shortest distance between Japan and the U.S. West Coast runs through Alaska. And so it was expected that the Japanese would make a play for the West Coast at some point. This is more the common people rather than the government. The government kind of knew that this was unlikely, but the broader public expected that the Japanese might make a play like this, and that in order to do it, they would make a play for Alaska first. And so there was a sense then that Alaska was held down to be a major theater. Did not end up happening, but that was the expectation at the time. So correspondingly, the U.S. military built up forces in Alaska, and that resulted in a not insignificant population influx, to the point where after World War II, the population had grown enough that statehood was a possibility. And they lobbied for it and eventually got that in the mid-late 1950s. Both Alaska and Hawaii became states in that same time period, pretty much for the same reasons. Population buildup from World War II.
Do you have any desire to go to Alaska?
None.
I see.
It's not even necessarily that I would not want to go on principle. Like, in principle, it would be a cool trip. Like, I don't deny that. The trouble is that, one, it's hella cold. And two, it's going to be hella expensive. That's going to be a big trip. Got to go all the way up there, got to go back, got to get lodging, whatnot. It's going to be a whole thing. Yeah, I feel like Alaska is more something you do when you want to do something outdoorsy. If you're an outdoorsman and you want to get like the authentic outdoorsman experience, Alaska is probably the best place to do that, because the population is really small, the wilderness is enormous. Like, you can really go out there and just experience true, genuine wilderness. And a lot of it is forest. You know, you can experience wilderness in the continental United States, specifically the contiguous 48, but it's going to be like desert or some shit. If you want forest, you kind of got to go to like Yosemite, maybe something like that, but that's much smaller in scale than Alaska. Alaska's way bigger. Alaska's basically an entire region unto itself. I think it's bigger than the Midwest. Is that right? Geographically speaking.
Damn.
Crazy big state. But yeah, I'm not an outdoorsman. I'm a fat guy who lives in his mom's basement. Adventures like that are not likely to be in the cards.
Not really your speed.
Yeah. Yeah, I probably just hold people back.
You hiked the Great Wall of China, though, dude.
I did not expect it to be a hike. I thought it would be more like a walk. A short walk along an old wall. Not so much a hike up a hill. So yes, I am capable of it, but it's not something I seek out. As bad as my health is these days, I might die. I may not survive the experience.
What? You'd crush it.
That's pretty optimistic. I did do the walk this week, by the way.
See, I told you you'd crush it.
Oh, that's going to be mine. That's peanuts compared to hiking the Great Wall or going to Alaska, that kind of stuff. Actually, did you know there was a pro hockey team in Alaska for a while?
I did not.
I think it was only a minor league team, but it was actually a full-on pro team and I don't know if they're still up there.
Huh.
Alaska, what were they called? Is it the Steelheads? That doesn't sound right. Aces, that's what it was. They were in the ECHL. Oh, yeah, they folded in 2017. That's too bad.
That's pretty recent.
Oh, sorry, they did not fold. They were relocated. There we go. So the team technically still exists.
They live
but
on.
now they play in Maine.
Ah.
Portland, Maine specifically. Yeah, the Alaska Aces were around from 1989 to 2017. It's a pretty good run. Yeah, it's over 20 years. It's too bad they lost the team. They were based in Anchorage.
The Aces named after pilots?
I don't know.
Because didn't they have a bunch of air bases on the islands of Alaska?
Yeah, but I don't know if that's what they're going for. Like the logo of the team is just a polar bear.
Oh,
Make of that what you will.
thought you were going to say something poker related. And you're like, oh, polar bear. Okay. I don't know how
No,
polar
no, they
bears
just said,
base.
fuck it, we're going with a polar bear. Yeah, it doesn't mention what they were named after.
Poker bear.
Poker bear. Yeah, there you go. Aces fans were known for using small ceremonial cowbells painted with the Aces insignia to show their support during games. There's a lot of incoherence here with the branding. Polar bears, aces, and cowbells.
What are you guys about? And they're like, hockey. Oh.
Well, I guess whatever works for them.
Nope. Random question before we start wrapping up here. What was the most decisive battle in the American Revolution?
How do we want to define decisive?
Where it shifted the expected outcome to be the advantage of the U.S.
That's an interesting definition. Because the metric is the public's perception. There were decisive battles during the war that were not really known, the significance of which were not really known at the time. So when historians look back, they'll say, oh, hey, that was a major battle, but that wasn't necessarily known as such by the broader public at the time. So what was a battle that was decisive and that was recognized by the public as marking a turning point that
Yeah,
shifted their expectations of victory?
yeah. Because I would guess
Okay.
that if you're just a random person in the colonies, whenever the conflict starts, you would assume, maybe unless you're invested in the U.S. becoming a country, you would assume that Britain, the established power, could just clamp down and get control again if they wanted to because they have a lot of resources, but they're very, very far away. So, logistically speaking, waging a war across the Atlantic is much harder than just attacking your neighbor in Europe or attacking your neighbor in the New World. But there would probably be certain turning points where it's like, damn, looks like Washington's going to do it or something.
It was very touch and go almost the entire revolution. There was not a lot of points where the broader public was like genuinely confident that they would be able to win. Yeah. I think George Washington was more confident because there kind of came a point when he was like, I just need not to lose. I can do the guerrilla warfare thing. I can just build up my army over time. I don't really have to win big decisive battles to win this. I just need to drag it out. But the broader public didn't necessarily think like that. From their perspective, it just seemed like the war was dragging out, was stalemated. It was not entirely clear like where the conflict was going to go. And there were definitely times when Washington's army was on its last ropes. They were having lots of difficulty retaining people, problems with funding, logistics, etc. They were definitely pretty raggedy there, especially at Valley Forge. I know people are going to say Saratoga. That was definitely a major battle and a major turning point. But I don't know that people at the time necessarily recognized it as such. I'm sure there were leaders in the revolution and in the Revolutionary Army who recognized it as having potential to be a turning point. But the broader public probably just saw a general battle. There was a battle at Saratoga, the revolutionaries won, but that was probably all they saw at the time. Because, if you're just a regular guy in the going public, you don't really see the big picture, like the God's eye view of the strategic situation. That kind of information is generally only privy to leaders, generals, representatives, etc.
Hmm.
So I don't know that it would have necessarily had all that dramatic an impact on public expectations at the time. I think the best answer I can come up with off the top of my head would be Yorktown. Because I think Yorktown proved pretty decisively that the British Army could not win in North America. And after that, it was just a matter of time before they kind of hashed out the terms of the agreement that would end the conflict.
How did that battle play out?
Let's see. There was a British army in the south. It was basically wrecking the Carolinas, specifically South Carolina. There was word about the French Navy being in the area. And so I'm paraphrasing. I don't really remember all the details off the top of my head, but there was word that the French Navy was in the area. And so there was an order given that the army in the south should move north.
Mm-hmm.
And the Americans realized that they were doing that. They did not move by sea, by the way, which they totally could have, but they decided to do it by land. And there's some, if I remember correctly, there was some controversy about whether or not there was a mix up in the orders about that. But because they moved over land, like it was like everybody saw it, everybody knew what they were doing, and they were very exposed. And so the result is that they ended up getting backed into a corner. They ended up backed into Yorktown, which was like a peninsula, and they were surrounded. They were laid siege by a combined army of American revolutionaries and French soldiers whom had been landed by the aforementioned French Navy. And there was no way out. Like they didn't see any way for the British Navy to get to them because the French Navy was there blocking Chesapeake Bay. They couldn't break the siege, and so they eventually surrendered. And that pretty much destroyed the British Army's presence in the South, which was the most active part of the front. The British had pretty much already given up on the North by that point. They weren't really contesting the Atlantic states. So that just left the South, and with the defeat at Yorktown, they lost hope for that as well. So at that point, it just became a matter of negotiating a settlement. For the broader going public in the United States, like it was a crushing victory to the point where people finally felt that they could beat the British Army on even terms. That was one of the, it wasn't the only like conventional victory the Revolutionary Army won, but it was probably the biggest and most decisive of the war. And that gave the public confidence. And as the negotiations started, that gave them even more confidence. So if the metric is a battle that was decisive and changed the public's expectations, Yorktown is probably the best example that meets those specific criteria.
I see. So it seems like the reasoning there is that's the tipping clearly in the advantage of the U.S. in a region where they didn't previously have control, which then means they have control over two regions, and also the French clearly demonstrate major help that can tip the scales.
I don't know that it was the French. So the French definitely contributed, but it was more the presence of the French Navy and the disruption that posed to operations. I mean, the French had proven to be kind of iffy on their commitment to the revolution. They were actually a lot more interested in fighting over Caribbean islands than they were in helping American revolutionaries. The expeditionary force they dispatched near the end of the war, leading up to Yorktown, was kind of a surprise, right? That was the most help they had ever given up till that point. And it wasn't at all clear that it was help that would be maintained. Like the French had proven that they were not as interested in the continent. So, yeah, the land force was not necessarily decisive, but the French Navy was definitely a big game changer. And just the defeat of the British presence itself was a game changer. Because you can't easily replace whole armies, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it complicates things as well, because if you're needing to navigate the French as you're crossing and then the colonials once you land, it's harder than if you could just guarantee ships all the way over.
Yeah, it was a major strategic victory. But it also kind of happened at the end of the war, and the final battles that end the war, that end a war, those are not necessarily viewed as like turning points, right?
Yeah.
They're
those are,
generally viewed as the culmination.
yeah, confirming the momentum that's been building.
Yeah, so if the question is, what was the most decisive battle that was a major turning point in the Revolutionary War? That was definitely Saratoga. I
Mm-hmm.
would 100% agree on that.
How did we win at Saratoga?
Benedict Arnold, ironically. Yeah, he was still on the revolutionary side at the time, and he played a decisive role. Very effective leader, but nobody wanted to give him credit. And his Achilles heel was being butthurt about not getting credit. Yeah, I don't remember the specifics of the actual battle, how it exactly played out. I remember there was a British expedition that was moving south down the Hudson River that was trying to meet up with English based in New York City. And they met resistance. I think Saratoga was where they encountered the Revolutionary Army. But there was a lot more detail to it than that. I think there was a lot of maneuvering, counter maneuvering, etc. Yeah, it's just been too long since I read about it or watched a documentary about it.
Chat saying there's an argument that the crossing of the Delaware proved the British could be beaten.
I think that was more proof that the Revolutionary Army was not going to just disappear and fade away because they were in a bad state at that point. Yeah, that happened during the winter when normally both armies were just camped out for the season. And it was also a surprise attack. They caught some, what was it, Hessian mercenaries, I think it was. Caught them off guard and basically crushed the British position on that side of the Delaware. But the overarching strategic significance was less. It didn't like crush the British position in the Americas. It just kind of caught them off guard and proved that the Revolutionary Army was still going strong.
I see.
But, you know, ambushing some outposts of mercenaries, that's not going to like prove too much in the grand scheme of things. And that's kind of more what they did. It was an impressive victory. It wasn't really a small battle. And it was decisive in its own right, but like the overarching strategic significance, if I'm remembering it correctly, it was not as great as like a lot of the other battles.
Steve Whiskey's saying enlistment went up over 100-fold after that. So it may have been more important as a morale booster than as a like strategic location to take.
I can see that.
Just kind of demonstrating that they can be beaten means that people have more confidence to join your side.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I can see that.
America.
It's a pretty zany place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had some discussion notes about what makes the United States unique, but we had other stuff to get to. And it's mostly just me meandering about the history of the United States, so I think we're just as well off.
Yeah, we didn't struggle to think of things to talk about. I think the World Cup is fun just because it throws the flags in front of you and you don't often think about a lot of other countries randomly. But seeing them kind of makes you wonder what they're up to.
Yeah, there's not too many left now. What are they, in the quarterfinals?
Mm-hmm.
It'll probably go pretty quick going forward.
Yeah. Morocco recently beat Canada 3-0.
I saw that. What was it, Brazil lost? Who did they lose to?
Norway, yeah.
That was Norway?
Roo. England did beat
shocking.
Mexico, so Norway will face England next.
Nice.
Switzerland's going to face Colombia. Argentina is facing Egypt. Portugal versus Spain. We talked about those countries today. And then USA versus Belgium with a adjusted roster thanks to a phone call.
Yeah.
Some political corruption. France beat Paraguay 1-0. Yeah. So yeah, it's just moving into the top 8 pretty soon.
Who do you think's going to win?
I want Norway to win.
Going to push Norway. That's a bold choice.
Yeah. I think they have that special period of a spike in talent, but they don't have ego yet. Because I think a lot of countries have more talent than them, but they also have more ego than them, and they kind of have to steer the team around the legacy of a player. Where Norway more so is kind of building a new generation of legacy. So it's exciting to see what they're going to do, and it seems like they have more of an attitude of fun with it than like Cristiano Ronaldo. He has such a storied name. I need to score just to continue to prove that my legacy is going to end on a good note. It feels very tense. Messi also is a really big name for Argentina. England has Kane, who's their striker dude. So yeah, it's a moody sport sometimes. It is. We were talking earlier about how acting skills can help you score penalty shots if you can really sell that you're hurt. I'm so hurt.
Yeah, that's an unfortunate aspect of the game. So yeah, who do we have in flags today? Oh, we got one from India. That's pretty rare. Don't get a lot of those.
Hello.
Got one from Georgia. It's actually a lot more diversity than usual. What is this one? Oh, we got one from Norway. Uruguay, Serbia. Yeah, it's quite a colorful collection. Got some Finns, a couple of French, a couple of Germans, mostly American and Canadian. It's pretty normal.
Mm-hmm.
One, the Netherlands. What is that? Australia. I can never tell Australia's flag from New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
They just look so similar. We actually have more New Zealanders than Australians tonight. That's unusual.
Interesting.
Don't get many of those.
Chat wanted to correct that the approval of the leader in Chile is 30%, not 20%.
Ah, okay.
It was gnawing at them. They're like, oh no, I told them the wrong number.
No, we welcome corrections. It's appreciated. Yeah, I didn't expect him to be that popular just because he is like the far right candidate. But yeah, 20 definitely would be extraordinarily low. 30, more normal. Whenever you see populist political leaders out there, their popularity never seems to fall below 30. I've noticed that pretty consistently.
Someone thinks the final match of the World Cup should be played in total darkness, punctuated by explosion fireworks. Oh, so you use the firework lighting to be able to see where you're going to shoot and where the ball is. That sounds exciting. Why don't we just have the leaders of these great nations in the World Cup all have a kind of phone auction for how much they're going to pay the ref for their team to win? Just streamline this whole monetization we're doing here.
There you go. The economist's perspective.
Yeah. Imagine the
process
fundraising.
more efficient.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about the fireworks idea. That seems like a recipe for epilepsy.
Yeah.
But the auctions could work. I could see that. We've gotten auctions down to a science.
Mm-hmm. Well, very cool. Nice discussion today. I'll have to let you know as the summer festivities are going on here in South Dakota what other local drama and news I get. It's very lively here in the summertime. The population goes from being 2,000 to way more than that from both imported workers temporarily and then also tourists going through.
Yeah, please do. Love to learn more about other states.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get out of Texas too much.
Texas is a big place, though.
That's true. We've got our own Dakota here. We call it Amarillo.
Yeah. Not too different. Middle of nowhere, higher altitude, less rainfall.
Yeah, we've got Dakota at home.
Mm-hmm. Well, awesome. Well, thank you, chat, for joining us. Thank you, Fuzzy Cold, for handling questions. Thank you, Agent Smith, for your time. We'll see you on the next episode of World Discussion with Agent Smith.
Yep. Thanks again. Always a privilege. Talk to you next time.
GG.